A scout galloped forward, shouting in both Persian and Greek. "The king's army is coming." The resting soldiers stirred in agitation. Cyrus the Younger, mounting his horse, demanded, "Pitychius, is it true? Has Artaxerxes arrived?" "Yes, Prince," Pitychius gasped, breathless. "Artaxerxes is here, along with Artaxerxes and that cursed Tissaphernes." "Excellent." Cyrus dismounted, donned his breastplate, and ordered his lieutenant, Areus, "Prepare the army for battle." Areus commanded the messenger, "Tell the Greeks to form up on our right wing." The messenger sped away. Cyrus positioned his Persian generals on the left, while he took the center with 800 cavalry. Artapates asked, "How many are they?" 60 to 80,000. Pitychius replied, his face pale with fear. The attendants gasped in terror. Cyrus embraced the dust-covered Pitychius and turned to his men. "Are you afraid?" His guards loudly protested their courage. "Artaxerxes is a coward who would wet himself at a puppy's bark." Cyrus joked, drawing laughter. "I have you, and we have already defeated the mighty Athens." Cyrus declared, emboldening his men. Looking at the Greek hoplites forming on the right, he added, "With our brave Greeks, we are invincible." "Victory!" the men roared. Cyrus raised his hand. "I swear by Ahura Mazda, I will reward your loyalty." "Cyrus the Great," the soldiers chanted in a thunderous wave. "Matones, any news?" I asked, tapping my comrade. "No, the sun is at its zenith, and I'm roasting." Matones snapped. Oliverus quipped, "I don't want to smell your cooked flesh," drawing laughter. Matones threatened him. "Keep talking, and I'll make you eat your own hand." Oliverus feigned terror, sparking more laughter. Silius warned, "Quiet, Menon is coming." A shrill voice pierced the air. "Is this a banquet?" Menon, wearing a red-crested helmet, barked, "This is a battlefield. If you don't fight, Hades will be waiting." "Shut up, Menon," someone shouted. Menon raged, demanding the culprit step forward, while the men stifled their amusement. Suddenly, a cry went up. "Look ahead." The soldiers' smiles vanished. A massive cloud of dust obscured the horizon. A black line emerged, growing thicker until the sun glinted off countless weapons. The sheer scale of the Persian army, the sound of their march, and the glint of their armor made the earth tremble. As Oliverus faltered, Silius shouted, "Prepare for battle." "Prepare for battle," the cry echoed. The Greek mercenaries donned helmets, drew their shields, and began rhythmic drumming. The noise steadied their nerves. The Persian army advanced slowly, scythed chariots in front, followed by archers, light cavalry, and infantry. Cataphracts guarded the king and the left flank, looming like a suffocating storm cloud. Cyrus rode along the line, cheering his men until he reached the right flank near the Euphrates River. "Salutations, Prince," Clearchus greeted him. Cyrus pointed to the enemy's center. "Charge the center and crush Artaxerxes. Victory will be ours." Clearchus observed the dense enemy formation and countered, "It is safer to crush the left wing first and then flank the center." "I know them," Cyrus urged. "Defeat Artaxerxes, and the rest is irrelevant." Clearchus shook his head. "I will not expose my flank to their main force." Cyrus frowned, frustrated by the mercenary's stubbornness but unable to force him. "Fine, do as you wish." Cyrus relented and rode away. 500 meters out, the Greeks began chanting the hymn to Ares. At 200 meters, the song ended. "Ares!" they roared, breaking into a run. The thunderous sound of 10,000 hoplites shook the earth. The Persians were paralyzed by the sight. A few scythed chariots charged, but the rest of the army, gripped by fear, forgot to fire or shield themselves. At 10 meters, the Persians broke and fled. The Greeks, eager for battle, pursued them relentlessly. Silius and other sergeants shouted, "Hold the line! Don't run too fast." The Greek pursuit devolved into a chaotic, adrenaline-fueled rout. Cyrus the Younger, positioned in the center, was momentarily stunned by the sudden collapse of the enemy's right wing. As attendants hailed him as king, Artapates asked if they should pursue. Cyrus shook his head, eyes fixed ahead. He knew the crown was only his if he eliminated the king himself. Cyrus ordered Areus's left wing to hold a defensive line. He knew his Greek mercenaries were his strongest asset. Rather than risking his smaller left wing against the enemy's right, he He chose to stall until the Greeks returned from their pursuit to secure victory. However, as he waited, the enemy center halted its advance. His expression darkened. The enemy center was splitting, with the left portion wheeling around to the rear. No, they're targeting the Greeks. Artapates cried out. If the scattered Greek hoplites were struck from behind, the battle could turn into a disaster. Artaxerxes, you dare shift formations? Cyrus sneered. He raised his spear. Right wing, advance. Cavalry with me. Ignoring his attendant's plea to don his helmet, Cyrus spurred his horse forward, his guards scrambling to surround him. 800 cavalry formed a wedge, charging toward the king's center. Artaxerxes, the Persian commander, was caught off guard by the charge. His infantry, mid-maneuver, blocked his own cavalry, allowing only 1,000 to squeeze through just as Cyrus's wedge slammed into them. The makeshift Persian line shattered under the impact. Cyrus's cavalry then drove like a blade into the rear of the Persian center. Cyrus and his elite followers, all seasoned warriors, used the momentum of their charge to trample the enemy, unwilling to risk losing their spears in the melee. The Persian infantry, already rattled by the earlier rout, broke under the assault. Through the dust, Cyrus spotted the king's chariot, exposed by the collapse of the Persian left. Left, Cyrus signaled, veering away from the enemy reinforcements to strike at the king's rear. Form up. Protect the king, Artaxerxes shouted, leading his guards in a desperate countercharge. Cyrus fought with lethal precision, parrying Artaxerxes' spear and slicing his throat with a Greek blade. With his guards clearing the path, Cyrus stood mere paces from Artaxerxes, seeing the terror on his brother's face. Consumed by years of resentment, Cyrus roared, "Artaxerxes!" and hurled his spear. It pierced the king's chest through the gap in the royal guard. The king screamed and collapsed onto his chariot. As chaos erupted, Cyrus laughed, believing the crown was his, ignoring his attendants' frantic warnings. His laughter died instantly as a javelin struck his eye, and he fell from his horse. Scylla entered the tent with food. The quiet tent erupted as the starving men snatched the rations. Metones devoured the half-raw horse meat, finding it delicious in his hunger. Menon had a team drag these carcasses from the field, Scylla explained, looking toward the back of the tent. How is Davos? Awake, but catatonic, Georgis replied sadly. He doesn't recognize anyone. He must have fallen into the river Lethe on Charon's boat, Oliverus muttered. Metones shoved him, but Scylla intervened. We are from the same town in Thessaly, thousands of miles from home, Scylla scolded. We must stay united. Silence fell over the tent. Scylla offered hope. I've seen men recover from head wounds. He might be himself by morning. Oliverus grumbled about Davos falling during the pursuit, but silenced himself under Metones' glare. Georgis finally voiced the question they all feared. Did Cyrus win or lose? After the pursuit, they had returned to find the Persian army still present, but Cyrus's forces gone. The armies had stood down at dusk, and the Persians eventually retreated. The Greeks, exhausted and having found their camp ransacked, had been too drained to investigate. Cyrus has cavalry, Scylla reasoned. He likely withdrew to regroup and fight again tomorrow. But the Persians outnumber us, Georgis worried. If Cyrus was defeated, our situation is dire. We have 10,000 hoplites. Metones boasted. The Persians are cowards. They won't stand against us. Even if Cyrus lost, we routed their left wing, Scylla added confidently. Their numbers are diminished. They stole our food and silver. Metones growled. Tomorrow, we take it back. The men agreed, their spirits rising with thoughts of plunder. Oliverus smirked. I heard Clearchus took that beautiful Miletus woman into his tent tonight. Enough, Scylla warned. If you're so bold, go defeat the king yourself and take his women, Metones retorted. The men laughed, their tension momentarily broken. A raspy voice came from the back of the tent. Have you not considered that Cyrus was not just defeated, but killed? Tissaphernes arrived at the king's tent, where the eunuch Massabates waited. The king is expecting you. As Tissaphernes surrendered his sword, he noticed the eunuch's somber expression and feared the king's wounds were grave. The tent smelled of frankincense and medicinal herbs. Artaxerxes lay on a couch, his chest bandaged and stained with blood. A maid massaged his shoulders while the physician Theseus stood nearby. As Tissaphernes entered, Artaxerxes dismissed Theseus, ordering him to wait nearby in case his wounds worsened. Tissaphernes knelt and confessed, "Great king, I have been defeated. I come to accept your judgment." Artaxerxes remained silent, leaving Tissaphernes kneeling in anxious stillness. Finally, the king spoke. "You were defeated, yet you dared to attack. You bypassed the hoplites to strike their rear, only to be repelled by peltasts and nearly struck by javelins." "Yes, great king, you know all," Tissaphernes replied, relieved. "You are braver than those who fled before the fight," Artaxerxes declared, his voice rising. "I was less fortunate. Cyrus's spear pierced my armor, but I unhorsed him." Tissaphernes suppressed his surprise, believing Maccabates had struck the blow, and praised the king's courage, calling him the true king of kings who had personally slain the rebel. Maccabates and Theseus joined in the adulation. Artaxerxes, flushed with anger, recounted Cyrus's past treachery, claiming he had forgiven him once for his mother's sake, only to be betrayed again. He declared that for the state's stability, he had no choice but to execute his brother. Tissaphernes vehemently agreed, denouncing Cyrus as a traitor who deserved his fate. Artaxerxes coughed, exhausted, and promised Tissaphernes rewards for his loyalty and governance of Asia Minor once the rebellion was quelled. Tissaphernes bowed, stating it was merely his duty. Artaxerxes gestured to a jar containing Cyrus's severed head and hand, ordering Tissaphernes to take them to the Greek camp and demand their surrender. Note: historical accounts of Cunaxa vary. This narrative follows Xenophon's version to highlight the Persians' post-battle reactions. Tissaphernes accepted, silently dreading the wrath of Queen Mother Persides upon learning her favorite son's fate. "Do you think the Greeks will surrender?" Artaxerxes asked. Tissaphernes replied cautiously, "I doubt the leaders will, though a few might obey your command." Artaxerxes, still shaken by the hoplites' charge, hoped for infighting. He sighed, preferring to exile the barbarian Greeks rather than continue the slaughter, regretting that he hadn't acted sooner to prevent this war. Tissaphernes praised the king's mercy, noting that this very nature had kept the empire's core stable despite the rebellion. Tissaphernes suggested, "Great king, I have an idea. Let us drive the Greeks to the north." Artaxerxes realized Tissaphernes wanted to spare his own territory, Asia Minor. "To the north?" The king smiled, envisioning the Greeks clashing with unruly tribes like the Dukians. He delegated the task to Tissaphernes, eager to return to Persepolis to handle new unrest and reunite with Queen Statira. At dawn, the Greek camp at Cunaxa lay in misty silence. I stepped out of my tent, observing the unfamiliar surroundings. I was no longer the 21st-century Chinese official who had blacked out after a celebratory banquet. My soul now inhabited this stranger. I still felt the phantom pain from pinching myself to test if it was a dream. Having adapted through the long night, I drew on my past experience as a resilient rural official to accept my new reality. I sighed, mourning the loss of my parents and fiancé, knowing I would never see them again. Wiping away tears, I resolved to survive in this new world. My host body was a 17-year-old Thessalian mercenary who had joined Minon's forces after his home was destroyed by Macedonian cavalry. From overheard conversations, I realized I was in the era following the Peloponnesian War, a period I knew from my hobby of reading military history. I eventually connected the 10,000 hoplites to the famous Anabasis I had once seen on a reading list. I recalled the event as the Great Retreat of the 10,000. When I had previously blurted out that the rebel prince would die, my comrades, who were banking on Cyrus's victory, had reacted with disbelief. Wishing to avoid conflict, I had remained silent. A restless night followed, filled with fear of the unknown. Now, I stepped out to face the vast, endless sea of tents. As I walked, I greeted fellow Thessalians from my unit, finding comfort in their familiar faces and the realization that I was not entirely alone. I wandered toward the sounds of livestock, recognizing the central area as the baggage train for Minon's mercenaries. It was filled with pack animals, looted cattle, and rations distributed by Cyrus the Younger, often frequented by merchants. Armed guards blocked the entrance. "No one enters without Minon's orders," a stout man shouted from behind them. I turned away to avoid trouble, hearing the man berate the guards for failing to stop thieves, claiming 5 sheep had been stolen since last night. The mercenaries were clearly starving. I walked past a makeshift fence, realizing the surrounding tents belonged to other mercenary units. As the fog cleared, I gazed at the vast landscape. I knew the nearby city was Babylon and the river the Euphrates, but wondered if I would ever see the fabled Hanging Gardens. Suddenly, the camp erupted in chaos. Anxious, I hurried back. Soldiers spilled from their tents, whispering the same 6 words: "Cyrus the Younger is dead." My heart sank. The great retreat had begun. Navigating the crowded, panicked camp, I ducked into my tent, met by 4 pairs of intense eyes. The tent was unnaturally quiet. "Davos, Cyrus is dead," Oliverus said strangely. "You were right." "I heard," I replied, sitting down. Silas, a fellow villager, looked at me with newfound distance. "Antonius," says Areus, Cyrus's lieutenant, confirmed his death and is gathering the scattered troops to join us. Matoni scratched his head, embarrassed. "I wanted to punch you for keeping me up last night, but you were right." Geogris asked, "What do we do now?" Oliverus demanded, "Tell us. What oracle did Hades give you?" I realized they believed I had been blessed by Hades. They had noticed a profound change in me since I awoke from my coma. My demeanor and speech were entirely different, lacking the roughness of my former self. They assumed I had met Hades in the underworld and been granted divine favor, especially given my sudden, startling awakening on the battlefield. To them, this divinely touched comrade was their only hope. I found this amusing but dared not deny it, as I lacked specific knowledge of the historical events to come. "It's no oracle," I insisted. "I just prepare for the worst." They didn't buy it, convinced Hades had sworn me to secrecy. They decided not to press me, looking at me with desperate expectation. Their gaze reminded me of villagers hoping for salvation. Sighing, I asked, "Do you know a man named Xenophon?" They shook their heads. Oliverus asked, "Can he help us?" I smiled, puzzled that no one knew the man who supposedly led the retreat and wrote the history of it. Silas asked, "Where is he from? Is he in our ranks?" "He should be," I replied. "He's an Athenian." "I'll ask around," Silas promised. Geogris warned, "Don't ask Clearchus's men, they hate us." Matoni scoffed, "We Thessalians aren't afraid of those Chersonesus bastards." Antonius, their captain, ducked into the tent. I knew him as their captain, though in this mercenary life, authority was loose and no one stood to salute. "Just telling jokes," Silas said. Antonius remarked on the chaos outside, noting their strange calm. He relayed Menon's orders. Cyrus's death was an accident. Their strength remained, and they would join Areus tomorrow to defeat the king of Persia and perhaps crown a new one. Silas grabbed him. "We need food. We've only had raw horse meat. If Mercis doesn't provide, there will be trouble." The others chimed in, threatening to quit if not fed. Antonius complained of his own hunger, explaining that the whole camp was starving. Menon was seeking help from Proxenus, but rations would be scarce. He hurried out before they could protest further. Silas sighed and stepped out to check another tent, leaving his squad of 9, with 5 men in an adjacent tent. Distracted by my existential crisis, I had forgotten to eat. The commotion finally triggered my hunger, and my stomach began to growl. I followed the others, wrapping myself in a wool blanket and lying on my bed to conserve energy. Oliverus broke the silence. "What a shame Cyrus the Younger died. He was a polite, helpful, and handsome prince. Even the queen of Cilicia was his mistress. He would have been a great king." I scoffed internally at the logic that good looks and womanizing equated to kingly virtue. "True," Geogris added. "He didn't look down on us like other Persians. If he were king, relations between Greeks and Persians would have improved. He was a warrior, unlike those soft Persians," Matonis chimed in. "And he was generous with gold," Oliverus added, earning nods of agreement. I found the eulogy absurd. Drawing on the body's memories, I countered, "Generous? He owed us 3 months' pay and only paid 4 months' worth after the Queen of Cilicia inspected the troops. He only raised our pay to 1.5 Daric gold coins when we refused to march against the king of Persia. He didn't pay the following 2 months. He used money extorted from the king of Cilicia. He promised 5 minie of silver after taking Babylon. But did he pay? After a long pause, Oliverus answered bitterly, he's dead. He brought us 3,000 miles into enemy territory without spending a single coin of his own. Would we have come if he'd told us we were fighting the king of Persia from the start? The 3 men shook their heads like puppets. He lied to us, luring us like sheep with bits of grass. Cyrus was a master con man who used 10,000 Greeks as pawns for his conspiracy without paying a price. Silence returned until Oliverus cursed, "Damn Cyrus. Damn the Persians. And that idiot Menon, always pushing us to be the vanguard for rewards. Menon is a brainless fool who will get us killed. My stomach. I'm starving." I found the scene amusing, having seen enough political maneuvering in my past life to recognize the patterns. Cyrus, a product of palace intrigue, was a master manipulator. Menon wasn't stupid. As a mercenary leader, he likely knew the plan and sacrificed his countrymen out of pure greed. "Davos, you never spoke like this before." "Are you really?" Matones asked cautiously. I, realizing I couldn't hide my 30 years of experience, decided to embrace the divine favor narrative. I told Matones I was still his brother and thanked him for his care, neither confirming nor denying the change. Matones was energized. "Don't worry. With me here, no one will bully you." "Davos, can we go home?" Georgos asked, full of anxiety. My revelations had clearly shaken their confidence in their own prospects. I smiled bitterly. History taught me that kings despise rebels, and as foreign invaders, we would likely be hunted down to serve as a warning. I doubted they would take Babylon, but to reassure the men, I said, "Don't worry, we will make it home." Seeing them relax, I sighed internally at their simple-mindedness, finding it a form of happiness to entrust their lives to my prophecies. I pondered my own situation. I was currently a pawn, but I needed to become a player to control my own fate. By afternoon, the Hilo squad received half a bag of flour and a dozen dates. They struggled up to bake bread. I helped actively, using the opportunity to learn the practicalities of the theory I held in my memory. Greek bread making was similar to Chinese methods, relying on yeast carried during campaigns. They baked the dough on iron plates over scavenged wood, ate their meager meal by evening, and fell asleep. At dawn, Silius woke them. Arius's envoy says he's returning to Asia. The leaders, refusing to return empty-handed, have promised to make Arius the king of Persia if he joins them to attack Babylon, and have sent Clearchus and Menon to persuade him. "Why send Menon?" Matones asked. "Don't you know he's close with Arius?" Oliverus smirked. "Can they convince him?" Georgos worried. Everyone looked to me. I felt the pressure but shook my head. Arius was a Persian noble. Joining the Greeks again would doom his family if they failed. He had likely already decided to abandon the Greeks. The group looked disappointed. "Brothers, leave the politics to the leaders," Silius urged. Menon ordered us to slaughter the extra livestock from the baggage train and prepare food. The prospect of a full meal temporarily lifted their spirits. Their task was to scavenge the battlefield for spears, shields, and wood from wagons to fuel their cooking fires, using an ox cart for transport. The battlefield was near the camp. The Persian army had retreated, allowing them to clean up without fear of immediate ambush. Before we arrived, I saw the sky darkened by swarms of crows, their screeching unsettling me. The field was carpeted in corpses and carcasses, swarming with flies and scavenged by wolves and leopards that didn't even flee at their approach. Every step I took sent clouds of flies into my face. I turned pale, my stomach churning. "Davos, you've seen this many times. Why are you bothered?" Matones asked, secretly pleased that his friend still needed his protection. I swallowed hard. Though I knew the history, this was my first time witnessing such carnage. I realized I had to adapt to this chaotic world. Ignoring the stench, I cleared corpses to retrieve shields, cleaned off the maggots, and loaded them onto the ox cart. The oxen were restless in the gore-filled field, nearly injuring Matones. I calmed them by blindfolding them with linen. The cart was soon full. Matones noticed I was missing. Oliverus pointed to me, as I was throwing javelins at a vulture, missing the agile bird. Training for the Olympic javelin event. Oliverus joked. Matones glared at him and walked toward me. I picked up another javelin, now fully acclimated to the grim environment. "Matones, how many archers do we have?" I asked, testing the blade. Geogris answered. Clearchus has about 300 Cretan archers, including peltasts who can throw javelins, maybe 3,000 total. And how many peltasts do we have? I asked. About 400, came the reply. Don't burn the javelins, I suggested. Let's equip every man with one or two. We are hoplites. Oliverus interjected. Hoplites can't reach Persian cavalry, I argued. Remembering Roman tactics, I proposed using javelins to keep the enemy at bay. Areus has cavalry, Oliverus countered. I smiled. Better to rely on ourselves. Geogris asked if this was a divine oracle from Hades. I remained silent. Matones liked the idea. He took the javelin and threw it, pinning the vulture to the ground. You need practice, Davos, Matones boasted. Though hoplites didn't traditionally use javelins, Greeks were skilled at them from childhood training for the Olympic pentathlon. Meat for lunch, someone cheered, though another worried the bird was cursed. Back at camp, the meat was prepared in pots over earthen stoves. They burned the broken weapons for fuel. Matones relayed my plan to Scylla. Seeing the wisdom in the God-favored man's suggestion, Scylla approached Antonius for support. Antonius consulted his sergeants. Opinions were split. Traditionalists opposed it, while others argued it would deter Persian cavalry. Antonius left it to individual squads to decide. Scylla returned to find the men eyeing the stew, but I was absent. Where is he? Checking the discarded offal, calling it a waste. I appeared, carrying bloody sheep intestines on a spear. Get that away, the men shouted, covering their noses. I insisted. We've been starving. We should store these organs to ensure we have food for future marches. Can we eat that? Marcius asked. Greeks rarely ate offal, fearing it was poisonous or foul-smelling. It's nutritious and improves your health, even your night vision, I claimed. Matones was intrigued. Others remained skeptical. Oliverus began bragging about Davos's recent divine transformation. I cleaned a cow's stomach in a nearby stream and boiled it. A crowd gathered, watching with curiosity. I seasoned the boiled stomach with broth and salt, creating a simple dish. Matones tasted it cautiously. He didn't speak, just kept eating. When the others realized it was good, they rushed the pot, and Matones ran off with it. I chuckled at the scene. So it is edible, Scylla remarked. I knew offal was healthy, and without industrial pollution, it was safe. But it will spoil by tomorrow, Scylla noted. We can make smoked meat sausages, I proposed. Smoked meat sausages? The men looked at me with newfound awe. They were convinced my culinary innovation and sudden wisdom were indeed gifts from Hades. I instructed the men to clean intestines in the creek, stuff them with minced meat and scraps, tie them with linen thread, and smoke them over a fire. I adapted this technique from my past life to preserve food quickly. The sausage-making drew crowds. With Oliverus and Matones spreading rumors, I gained a reputation as God-favored. By noon, news arrived. The mercenaries rejected the king of Persia's surrender demand. By afternoon, Areus's envoy returned, stating Areus refused to attack the king and wished to return to Asia Minor with the Greek mercenaries. My prediction proved correct again, no longer surprising my peers. Clearchus announced he would sacrifice to Zeus to decide whether to fight or retreat. I found the ritual a transparent excuse for leaders to shirk responsibility, though my companion's solemnity reminded me of the cultural gap. The unfavorable omen led to the command. The mercenaries would join Areus and march back to Asia Minor. Soldiers began packing baggage for a night departure signaled by bronze horns. Tension filled the camp, yet relief was palpable. After 8 months, they were finally going home. Scylla asked if the sausages were ready. I checked the meat, deciding to leave them until dark to maximize preservation. I observed and mimicked my companion's practiced tent dismantling routine to internalize the muscle memory. At the baggage camp, Mercis, the logistics officer, managed the chaotic loading process with surprising efficiency. I asked who the man was. Oliverus grumbled that Mercis was a greedy pig who charged 2 silver coins for access to women. I asked if they had ever marched at night. Scylla explained that night marches were rare and dangerous for the easily spooked pack animals, so the baggage train usually traveled separately. I approached the baggage camp despite warnings. A guard stopped me, but I insisted on speaking to Mercis. The guard warned me not to disturb the busy officer. I shouted that I could solve the problem of animals panicking at night. The crowd took notice, whispering about the God-favored Davos. I realized my reputation was spreading as intended. Mercis approached, skeptical of my claim. Matonis proudly vouched for me. Recognizing me as the sausage maker, Mercis's demeanor shifted to excitement. I confirmed my identity. Mercis dragged me inside to inspect his own sausages. After I critiqued his work, Mercis complained about the soldiers wasting meat before asking again about the pack animals. I explained that blindfolding the animals would keep them docile and obedient to their handlers. Mercis rushed off to test the theory, promising me free access to women in return. I smiled at the man's earnestness. As the sun set, the soldiers prepared their gear. I donned my layered linen cuirass, which was light, flexible, and wing-cut for mobility. I put on greaves and strapped on my curved Greek sword. I tied my Corinthian helmet to my spear, as it restricted vision too much for a night march. I took up my ashwood spear with its iron head and bronze butt spike. I gripped my large, bronze-faced round shield, which featured a minotaur emblem and was designed for both defense and bashing. Holding my gear, I felt my body's muscle memory react with excitement. I felt a thrill. I was finally living the warrior's dream I had only imagined in my modern life. Silas reminded me of my remaining gear. I sighed, carefully securing my javelins and the sausages to my armor. Captain Antonius approached, showing newfound respect for me, and ordered them to join the baggage train. Silas questioned the order, wary of the baggage train's slow pace and danger. Antonius explained that the deputy commander, Felicius, had specifically requested their unit to assist the understaffed logistics team. Mercis greeted me with a boisterous hug, drawing attention from the other officers. I realized the fat man was behind the reassignment. Mercis ordered the others to handle the animals while keeping me by his side, much to my annoyance at the unwanted attention. The baggage train contained hundreds of livestock, dozens of ox carts laden with supplies, and numerous slaves and women. The column stretched for 2 miles. I observed the bloated, cumbersome nature of the Greek mercenary supply line. A long bugle call pierced the night. It was time to move. I gripped my ox rope, feeling a surge of nervous tension. The army advanced, a long, serpentine trail of torches under the moonlight, with the baggage train on the right and troops on the left. After an hour, the sound of rushing water signaled their approach to the Euphrates River. The river appeared as a dark, bottomless void, chilling the men into silence for fear of disturbing the river god. The leaders wisely positioned the baggage train along the riverbank, with the troops on the outer flank to protect their assets. I silently noted their tactical experience. Menon's troops were relegated to the rear. Mercis, Menon's confidant, explained to me that the other leaders, resentful of Menon's past opportunism and greed, had forced this position upon him. Tormid, the herald, arrived to announce that the leaders were meeting with Arius. He ordered the men to hold their position and remain vigilant. The exhausted soldiers erupted in murmurs of relief, complaining about the grueling 2-hour march. "Dragging these carts is killing us," one soldier grumbled. "We can't stay with the baggage train tomorrow." "Agreed. We'll tell the captain," others chimed in. I stood up, shouting, "Brothers, quiet. It's me, Davos." My voice carried more authority than the captain's. The men fell silent, eager to hear the God-favored one. "Shall I tell you a story to pass the time?" I asked. "How about Eris and the 40 thieves?" I began. "Once, in a small Ionian town, there lived a family." The camp fell into a hush. Even the beasts stopped braying as the men, slaves, and women hung on every word of the tale. When I finished, the men clamored for more. "Eris was lucky," one said. "He was lucky because he had a clever Persian slave girl," another countered. "He should free her. She saved his life." "Fool. He should take her as a concubine so she can keep helping him." The debate raged on. Mercis leaned in, whispering, "Davos, do caves filled with gold really exist?" Antonius watched me, sighing. "Silas, your village has produced a real talent." "That's Davos for you," Silas replied. "He's God-favored. I'd give him my sergeant rank if I could." Antonius scoffed. Mercenary leaders rarely replace their core officers, preferring loyalists. Having served Menon for years, Antonius knew how to judge men. He noted my maturity, eloquence, and ability to solve problems. I was humble, hardworking, and earned the genuine trust of my peers. If I possessed tactical skill, my potential was limitless. Antonius wondered how Menon would react to such a rising star in his ranks. Empty, at dawn, the army was forced back onto the road. Menon, returning to his rearguard position, cursed Clearchus, convinced the assignment was a deliberate slight born of jealousy. He found his men exhausted and demoralized. With little food and no rest, morale was plummeting. Fearing a mutiny, Menon hurried to his troops, only to slow down when he saw them looking surprisingly alert. He noticed them chewing on black, dried strips hanging from their necks. He summoned a sergeant to investigate. "It's smoked meat sausage," the sergeant explained. "It stays good for days." Menon tasted it. It was dry but edible. Pleased his men were fed while others starved, he asked, "Did Mersis make this?" "No, it was Davos, the god-favored one." Menon's expression darkened at the mention of the name. He also noticed soldiers carrying extra javelins. "Where is this Davos?" "He's guarding the baggage train," the sergeant replied, oblivious to Menon's mood. "Do you want to see him?" Menon dismissed the idea. A mere peasant from Thessaly wasn't worth his time. He would summon the boy later. The march continued relentlessly from morning through the afternoon. My legs felt like lead, and my throat burned. I pushed through the fatigue, mirroring the silent endurance of my comrades. The column halted abruptly. Panic flared at reports of Persian cavalry, which turned out to be nothing more than grazing pack animals. The march resumed. As dusk fell, I saw dense plumes of smoke in the distance. Silas identified them as Persian campfires. The army marched on in the dark, guided by torches, until they were finally ordered to camp. The terrain was flat and exposed. Exhausted and leaderless in the dark, the rear guard descended into chaos. Frightened pack animals bolted, causing injuries and near panic. Clearchus sent his cavalry unit to restore order. They used torches to command silence and threatened punishment for those who let the animals loose. Order was slowly restored. Menon finally located Tormid, the best of heralds, to discuss the situation. Menon seized the chance to disparage Clearchus, blaming him for the near mutiny and questioning his fitness to command the entire army. Tormid remained silent until Menon demanded to know Clearchus's location. Tormid hesitantly replied, "He is with the vanguard." Sensing the hesitation, Menon pressed, "Are they also without shelter like us?" Tormid admitted the vanguard was housed in a village, citing the extraordinary circumstances. Menon sneered at Clearchus's hypocrisy, fuming that while Clearchus enjoyed a warm house, his own men were left on the cold, damp ground. Exhausted, the soldiers grumbled briefly before collapsing into sleep. "Menon, Menon," someone called out. It was Mersis. Menon hurried him over, anxious about the baggage train, which held his wealth and the means to pay his troops. Mersis grinned, explaining they had circled the wagons and tethered the pack animals inside for safety. Tormid asked if the animals were restless, as he was used to chaotic baggage camps. Mersis credited me, as I had suggested blindfolding the animals to keep them calm. Menon frowned at the mention of me. Mersis requested that I be transferred to the baggage train to lighten his own workload. Menon dismissed the idea coldly. He only trusted Mersis with his finances and secrets. A clever stranger was too great a risk. The next morning, a herald summoned Menon to meet with the king of Persia's envoy and the other commanders. Riding forward, Menon noted the Persian army had retreated 10 miles overnight, clearly intimidated by the mercenaries' noise. Near the command tent, Menon found 4 battalions of Greek hoplites fully armed and ready. Inside, he met Clearchus, Proxenus, Achilles, Socrates, and Soaxesai. Menon sarcastically remarked on the others' comfort compared to his own men's suffering. Clearchus, a stubborn Spartan, ignored the provocation. Achilles mocked Menon's sudden concern for his troops. Proxenus intervened, praising Menon for the order in his baggage train and asking for advice. Socrates noted that Menon's men were the only ones well-fed, thanks to their smoked meat sausage. Encouraged by the attention, Menon boasted that a good leader must find solutions regardless of the environment. Clearchus cut him off, ordering the Persian envoy to be brought in. The commanders focused their attention, silencing Menon. The envoy proposed a truce instead of surrender. The desperate mercenaries, low on supplies, eagerly agreed, securing food provisions from the Persians. Clearchus remained vigilant, marching in a tight formation. The route was blocked by sewage-filled trenches, forcing the soldiers to build bridges, though my rear guard remained relatively unburdened. Oliverus pointed out Clearchus, who was shirtless and scarred, laboring alongside his men to repair a bridge in the mud. Matones remarked pointedly on the contrast between Clearchus and Menon. Despite the friction between their leaders, the soldiers recognized Clearchus's competence and leadership, explaining why he remained the de facto head of the mercenaries. I observed Clearchus, noting the essence of true command. By dusk, the Greeks reached a village with comfortable quarters and abundant food, prompting cheers from the men. I was skeptical of the Persian hospitality until Antonius arrived with a summons from Menon. Antonius confirmed the urgency of the meeting. Seeing his companions' concern, Antonius assured them it was likely just curiosity or a reward for my recent contributions. Antonius led me to a large house and informed the guard of Menon's summons. The guard told them to wait, claiming Menon was busy. After a long delay, Antonius grew impatient and tried to enter, but the guard blocked him. Under pressure, the guard finally agreed to check again. He returned, telling them to enter but avoiding eye contact with Antonius. Before entering, Antonius warned me not to argue with the temperamental Menon. I smiled, assuring him I wasn't a child. Antonius realized with a start that the young man's composure far exceeded his own. Frustrated, Antonius confronted the guard, Potax, about the deliberate delay. Potax admitted it was Menon's petty game. Antonius grunted in annoyance. Potax wondered if the god-favored youth understood the game, noting that I had smiled at him. I understood perfectly. I had seen such power plays before. I wondered if Menon's need for such tactics stemmed from a lack of genuine confidence. I walked to the main room. Leader Menon, Soldier Davos reporting as ordered. Enter, a crisp, sharp voice replied. I entered to find Menon sitting in the center, clad in shining breastplate. Despite the armor, his fair, clean-shaven face lacked the expected air of authority. I recalled rumors of Menon's intimacy with Cyrus the Younger's adjutant, Areus, and felt a flicker of unease. Menon, meanwhile, scrutinized me, noting a unique, composed aura despite my unremarkable appearance. I hear you are god-favored, Menon asked casually. Is the Persian truce genuine, or do they have ulterior motives? I don't know, leader, I replied instantly. Menon smirked, amused by the bluntness. Then tell me, will we make it home safely? I don't know. Menon slammed his chair in fury. You claim to have oracles and know everything in camp. Now you're silent? You're a fraud. I raised an eyebrow. I never claimed to be God-favored. My teammates can attest to that. People say what they want. As for oracles, I only share educated guesses with friends to boost morale. Whether we return home is for you leaders to decide. Menon was momentarily stunned by my eloquence and steady, defiant gaze. Irritated, Menon waved me off. I'll investigate that. Regardless, stop speculating about the Persians. It hurts morale. I bowed my head. Yes, sir. Mollified, Menon tossed me a handful of drachmae. This is a reward for your recent advice. Remember, bring me your ideas directly next time, and you'll be rewarded again. I feigned delight. Thank you, leader. As I left, Menon felt uneasy. He couldn't easily control or dismiss a soldier as sharp as me without losing a valuable asset. The Persians kept their word, leading the Greeks to a fertile region with abundant villages, providing 2 estates for the troops and ample food. After days of starvation, the soldiers feasted heartily. The next day, I felt refreshed but puzzled. Was this Persian generosity a trap to lower their guard, or was the empire simply different? I recalled lessons on the Persian Empire. Cyrus had risen by exploiting the decline of Media and Assyria, using a policy of religious and cultural tolerance to secure quick surrenders. The empire was managed through a central capital, Persepolis, direct rule in rich Mesopotamia, and autonomous satrapies elsewhere. I realized the Persians were stricter in Mesopotamia, the king's direct territory. Suddenly, Zysite grabbed me, interrupting my thoughts. Who? I asked, confused. Assists Antonius's nephew, Zysite said anxiously. He fell when a bridge broke yesterday, suffered a deep thigh wound, and is now delirious with fever. The doctors are helpless. Oliverus joked. He's probably already meeting Hades. But Davos, you're the God-favored one. You have to save him. I looked troubled. I'm no physician, Zysite pleaded. Antonius knows, but he's desperate for any hope. I hesitated, then realized that helping might actually shift my reputation away from divine status and toward practical competence, potentially easing Menon's jealousy. Fine, I'll go, I agreed, followed by Geogris. The room was crowded, but the men parted as I entered. The patient was unconscious, his thigh wound swollen and festering, his body burning with fever. I touched the patient's forehead, then pressed the wound, releasing green pus that smelled faintly of incense. A man looked up. I applied grape leaf oil, but it's not working. That's Hirpulisai, our camp doctor, Zysite whispered. I was surprised. Why not use bloodletting? I feared he wouldn't recover in time for our march, Hirpulisai lamented. Even the expensive Marian incense failed. I realized the strange smell was just the incense. I recalled that ancient Western medicine relied heavily on bloodletting. Who are you? Hirpulisai asked. Antonius interrupted. He is Davos, the god-favored of Hades. Can he be saved? I will try my best, but there are no guarantees, I replied cautiously. Antonius looked relieved. Should we prepare an altar to Hades? Why? For prayer. I saw the expectant faces waiting for a divine miracle. I smiled grimly. I don't pray. I use medical methods. If you only want a miracle, I'm leaving. The crowd groaned in disappointment. Antonius, however, nodded firmly. Do as you say. I did this to lower expectations for my success and distance myself from the divine label. Clear the room. Open the windows. Boil water, sterilize linen cloths, and sharpen a clean knife in the boiling water. Bring more cold water. I commanded clearly. Antonius, Zysite, and Geogris immediately scrambled to follow my orders. Hirpulisai, who initially viewed me with suspicion as a mere witch doctor, was intrigued by my organized preparations and asked, Davos, how do you intend to treat him? The wound is infected, causing high fever, but no major vessels were severed. I will perform debridement and fever reduction. I explained, treating modern medical common sense as a breakthrough in this superstitious era where people blamed spirits for illness. Hirpulisai's eyes lit up. This sounds similar to Hippocrates' methods of debridement, traction, and reduction for fractures. Hippocrates of Kos? I recognized the name as the father of Western medicine. Yes. Do you know him? Not personally, but I've heard of him. I tried to visit him while passing through the Aegean, but he was away. Though many Greek doctors disagree with him, he has cured many. Seeing Hirpulisai's regret, I felt an opportunity. Would you like to be my assistant? I would be honored. Hirpulisai replied gratefully, knowing that in this era, medical knowledge was usually restricted to hereditary apprenticeships requiring heavy fees. Empty. Geogris, hold assist down. Hirpulisai, fold the linen in cold water, place it on his forehead, and keep wiping his neck. Silas, clean the wound area with boiled linen. Take the knife out of the boiling water and sear it over the flame. I hesitated before cutting. I was relying on memories of rural, barefoot doctors performing emergency debridement on deep, wedge-shaped wounds. Gritting my teeth, I commanded, hold him tight, and slice the skin. He's quieted down. Hirpulisai exclaimed in surprise. Wiping sweat, I sighed with relief. Keep cooling his forehead and neck. If the linen soaks with pus again, repeat the debridement. Understood, Davos. Hirpulisai's tone was now that of a respectful student. I felt a surge of accomplishment as I looked at the wood splinter removed from the wound. As I stepped outside with Silas and Geogris, the anxious crowd swarmed us for news. He is much better, Geogris announced proudly, drawing cheers from the crowd. I cautioned, he is not out of danger yet. The next 2 days are critical. He must fight the illness himself. Hirpulisai will oversee his care. I instructed Antonius, ensure he drinks only boiled, cooled water. Once he is conscious, feed him oatmeal. He will vomit it up, Antonius worried. Feed him again if he does. He needs strength. Keep the room quiet, ventilated, and dry with a fire. Antonius took notes, then asked, if we do all this, will he recover? I fell silent. In my past life, antibiotics would suffice. Here, I was an amateur in a primitive world. We have done our best. The rest depends on him. I replied, leaving as the crowd looked on with newfound reverence. Returning to our quarters, we found Matonis struggling to hold on to a man. Wait, Davos is back. Matonis beamed. Davos, I finally brought Xenophon to you. I stared at the man, who returned my gaze. Xenophon was about 30, with classic Greek features, dark curls, a high nose, a square jaw, a thick beard, a broad forehead, and sharp, inquisitive eyes. Xenophon was initially disappointed by my youth, but noted how the older men deferred to me as their leader, marking me as someone unique. Xenophon of Athens? I asked. Yes. A student of Socrates? Correct. Xenophon was stunned. Most mercenaries were illiterate, and few knew of Socrates, let alone his students. Who was your teacher? Xenophon asked. I am illiterate, I admitted frankly. My calm confidence regarding my lack of education left Xenophon unable to feel any contempt. I went to Proxenus's camp specifically to find you, Matonis boasted. Your companion insisted I come, claiming I was the man the God-favored one was looking for, Xenophon said with a smirk. Thank you, Matonis, I said, touched by my friend's dedication. Matonis is a very passionate man. You will see that soon. Matonis scratched his head, embarrassed. Xenophon shrugged off my apology, signaling no offense, then leaned in. Is what he said true? Are you truly God-favored? What do you think? Do the gods still favor Greeks on Persian soil? I countered. Of course. The gods never abandon us. Xenophon replied instantly. I came here following an oracle from Apollo. I was surprised. I had underestimated the Greeks' piety. What was this oracle? I asked. Xenophon began his tale with excitement. 6 months ago, his friend Proxenus wrote from Athens, praising Prince Cyrus the Younger as a virtuous man who favored Greeks. Having joined Cyrus's service, Proxenus invited Xenophon to Asia Minor, promising to recommend him to the prince. Athens had just emerged from the brutal 30 tyrants' rule, and the restored democracy was fragile. Seeking to broaden his horizons, but wary of the political fallout from associating with Cyrus, who had helped Sparta defeat Athens, Xenophon consulted his teacher, Socrates. Socrates advised him to seek an oracle at Delphi. Xenophon asked Apollo which god he should pray to for a safe journey and return. After receiving the name and performing the required sacrifices, he set sail for Asia Minor to join Proxenus. What name did the oracle give? Oliverus asked. Xenophon looked at me and replied clearly. Ha, da. The group gasped in awe, praising the divine connection between me and Xenophon. They began to recite a hymn to the Lord of the underworld. I, dismissing it as a coincidence, joined the chant perfunctorily before adding. Even with Hades' favor, our own efforts are required to return home safely. Xenophon watched me intently. A believer in omens, he felt a mysterious bond with the man rumored to be Hades' favorite. I am but a common hoplite, blind to the bigger picture, I said calmly. As a close friend of Proxenus and a student of Socrates, could you explain our current situation? I silenced Oliverus with a look before he could interrupt. Xenophon stepped forward, feeling a divine responsibility to steady the morale of the troops. First, Xenophon began. Our hoplites are superior. Since Thermopylae, we have dominated the Persians. Their cavalry may be fast, but they fear close-quarters combat and cannot break our lines. Cavalry are cowards, Matonis shouted, causing Xenophon to flush slightly. But their javelins and arrows are troublesome, Silius noted. They lack the courage for a direct fight, Xenophon insisted. They cannot stop us if we decide to retreat. Second, Artaxerxes is weak and timid, which is why Cyrus rebelled. Though Cyrus fell, the king fears internal unrest and will not risk a desperate battle against us. Third, our commanders are elite. Clearchus is a veteran, and Proxenus and Menon understand the Persians well. Conversely, Artaxerxes is inexperienced, and his general Tissaphernes has already been defeated by us. I applauded sincerely. A brilliant analysis, worthy of Socrates' student. Indeed, you have restored our confidence, Silius added. Xenophon remained composed, his gaze lingering on me, curious about the God-favored man. I, unwilling to be underestimated, interjected. You missed a point. Persia is vast, but poorly governed. They rely on taxes and conscription, but lack internal cohesion. Because they exclude foreigners from their ranks, their army lacks loyalty. That is why they crumble when they face us. Xenophon was stunned. The 19-year-old's insight into Persian systemic weakness surpassed his own. He could only attribute it to divine wisdom, agreeing that the lack of democratic spirit was Persia's downfall. I smirked at the mention of democratic superiority, a look Xenophon caught immediately. You disagree, Davos? When was Athens at its most prosperous? I asked, aiming to impress the scholar. Under Pericles, Xenophon replied. You ignore Pisistratus, I countered. He unified Attica and developed Piraeus, making Athens a power rivaling Sparta. Xenophon was taken aback. Athenians rarely praised tyrants. He struggled to refute the historical fact. I pressed on. Pericles ruled for 30 years as chief general. Is it not ironic that your democracy relied on a man who never lost an election? Was Pisistratus a tyrant while Pericles was a democrat? Pericles was simply more subtle. And look at the result. Internal strife, the exile of Alcibiades, and the execution of generals after Arginusi. Your perfect democracy exhausted its own strength through infighting. I drew upon my modern political education, my memory of these events remaining sharp. Note 1. Historians often view Xenophon as less profound than Thucydides or Plato, noting his reliance on omens and political bias. However, his first-hand accounts remain invaluable. Note 2. Among the generals executed after Arginusi was the younger Pericles, the last son of the statesman. Empty. Xenophon was shaken by this unprecedented critique of Athenian democracy. Then, is Sparta the best? He stammered. Sparta. I sneered. They enslaved the Messenians, creating a powder keg. A state built on suppressing 10 times its population is a volcano waiting to erupt. But Davos, Oliverus interjected, Sparta is currently the strongest city-state in Greece. Let's see how long its strength lasts. I replied confidently, recalling that Sparta would soon fall to the rising Thebes. When asked if this was an oracle or which city-state had the best system, I merely offered a mysterious smile. Xenophon, deeply shaken by my words, struggled to reconcile his lifelong beliefs with this new perspective, relying on his Socratic training to process the challenge. Disturbed and needing time to reflect, Xenophon bid me farewell. As I left, I casually asked, Xenophon, have you ever commanded troops? I served as a cavalry captain, Xenophon replied hurriedly. I watched him go, skeptical. How could a newcomer and minor officer like Xenophon possibly lead the retreat? Recalling that Xenophon authored the Anabasis, I wondered if he had claimed credit for others' achievements. Silius, confused by the critique of Athens and Sparta, asked for clarification. I sighed. They would thrive in peace. But this is an era where one must advance or perish. Silius asked if any city-state possessed a better system. Looking at the sunset, I envisioned the coming wars and the rise of a great emperor. I told Silius, not yet, but if we survive, perhaps you will see one. At dawn, I was awakened by a commotion outside. Antonius burst in, overjoyed. He's awake. Assist is alive. Thank you. Still groggy, I asked, really? Hirpulesi followed, confirming that Assist was conscious, his fever had broken, and he could eat porridge. I remained calm, advising them to continue the care regimen to ensure a full recovery. Hirpulesi agreed, and Silius informed me that many people were waiting to see me. Antonius explained that Capys and others wanted my help, feeling guilty for the trouble they were causing me. I, unfamiliar with Capys, learned he was another hoplite captain. I stood up, ready to face the crowd. Outside, soldiers whispered in awe, calling me a favorite of Hades for saving Assists. A soldier pleaded, Davos, my brother is wounded and feverish. Please help him. Others echoed the plea, desperate for aid. The courtyard was packed with shouting, desperate men. I remained composed, drawing on my past experience managing crowds to handle the situation. I raised my hands, and with Antonius's help, the crowd quieted. I am grateful for your trust, I declared. We are brothers in arms. I will work with Hirpulesi to save every wounded man. I will abandon no one. The soldiers were moved to tears, praising me as their savior. One soldier vowed, You are our brother. We will do anything for you in the future. I had given them hope against the nightmare of battlefield infections. Cheers of Davos echoed throughout Menon's camp. As Hirpulisai and I planned our medical efforts, Minen's guards arrived to summon me. Minen greeted me with anger. You promised to tell me your new ideas first, but you deceived me. What did I do wrong? I asked, bewildered. You saved those soldiers without informing me first. Minen snapped. I laughed. Commander, it was an emergency. If I had waited for your approval, Assist would be dead. I retorted sarcastically. This isn't some new idea, but my ancestral medical knowledge. I joined as a mercenary, not a slave who needs your permission to save lives. Minen was left speechless. He had summoned me in a fit of jealous rage after hearing the soldiers chanting my name, only to find himself in an awkward position. He pivoted. You'll be my personal guard from now on. Don't leave without my orders. He felt an urgent need to isolate me from the men to maintain his own control over the mercenaries. I'm sorry, Commander Minen. I'm better suited as a soldier, and my captain wouldn't agree to this. I replied, sensing Minen's true intent. Minen laughed in disbelief. I am your commander. Who would dare defy my orders? I would, Antonius declared, entering the room, followed by Capus and several other captains. I felt relieved seeing Antonius. I hadn't known that Silas, sensing trouble when the guard dragged me away, had immediately alerted Antonius. Who let you in? Where are my guards? Minen demanded, unsettled by the sudden arrival of his key officers. Commander, the wounded are waiting for me. We can't afford delays, Antonius said, his tone polite but threatening. The cold stares of the officers made Minen falter. Backing down, Minen stammered. I was just pleased that I saved the wounded. I wanted to appoint me as the camp physician. I'm happy to treat my brothers, but I won't be your physician or your guard. I'm a soldier under Silas, I stated firmly. I refused to reconcile with Minen, knowing the bridge was already burned. Humiliated by a common soldier's defiance in front of his officers, Minen roared, Davos! Before he could continue, a thunderous roar erupted outside. Give us back our Davos. Let the soldiers live. Minen, release him or we're coming in, the soldiers shouted. Terrified, Minen told me to leave. I nodded and thanked the captains for their support. Minen glared at the officers. Once I left, he hissed, Antonius, Capus, have you all turned against me? You are our commander, but Davos is favored by Hades. The soldiers have seen his miracles. We must respect the gods and ensure our safe return. Antonius replied diplomatically. Minen understood the subtext. They would obey him, but not when it came to me. Amintas, the most vocal critic, added, Our contract is over, Minen. Try anything else, and we'll elect a new leader. This hit Minen's weak point. He relied on his connections to secure pay, but with Cyrus dead, he had no funds. He only held power because the soldiers needed unity to survive and were accustomed to the existing command structure. Now, the officer's defiance signaled his crumbling authority. Minen knew he was unpopular. Previously, he didn't care, as he could easily replace soldiers. But in the current dire circumstances, this was his greatest anxiety. After forcing a calm facade to dismiss the officers, Minen roared in frustration, only to realize his personal guard had vanished. Fearful and restless, he eventually decided to seek out Areius, hoping to leverage his connections to secure a safer return. He groomed himself, mounted his horse, and rode north. Having tested his influence, I returned to my quarters and immediately began discussing a medical plan with Hirpulisai. I proposed a superior medical system, forming a team with Hirpulisai, training soldiers as medics and slave women as nurses, establishing a field hospital, enforcing strict hygiene to prevent infection, and adopting local Mesopotamian remedies after modern analysis. I aimed to make this medical team a permanent, indispensable fixture of the army. I knew that controlling the soldiers' health meant controlling their loyalty. As I prepared my hospital, Tissaphernes, the governor of Asia Minor, arrived at the Greek camp, offering hope for a peaceful return to Greece. The commanders welcomed him warmly. After Tissaphernes left, the commanders eagerly awaited his return, hopeful for a peaceful resolution. 2 days later, Tissaphernes returned with the king's decree. The king accepted the mercenaries' apology and authorized Tissaphernes to lead them home, promising supplies along the way provided they kept order. Both sides swore oaths to the gods, and Tissaphernes departed to finalize arrangements. The news spread, and the camp erupted in cheers. I remained vigilant, despite my recent conversations with Xenophon regarding the reality of the Persian situation. Xenophon visited again to discuss democratic city-states, but I steered the conversation toward the local customs of the Greek city-states. I listened intently as Xenophon spoke, eventually asking about Tissaphernes, whose history left a deep impression on me. During the Peloponnesian War, Tissaphernes had allied with Sparta to weaken Athens, only to withhold funds, prompting Sparta to complain to Darius II, who then sent Cyrus the Younger to support Sparta. Though stripped of military power, Tissaphernes befriended Cyrus. Later, he betrayed Cyrus to the new king, Artaxerxes, leading to Cyrus's brief imprisonment. Back in Asia Minor, Tissaphernes became Cyrus's rival. When Cyrus rebelled, Tissaphernes fled to the king's side. During the battle, he showed courage by attacking the Greek rear, earning him the king's favor as the current envoy. Analyzing this, I concluded that Tissaphernes was a duplicitous, opportunistic politician. I doubted such a man would ever keep his word. I shared my concerns with Xenophon, who sighed. Proxenus and the others are vigilant, but we cannot return home without abandoning the war against the king of Persia. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers are impassable obstacles, and foraging for food leaves us vulnerable to attack. If the king truly wanted us dead, he wouldn't provide supplies or have Tissaphernes swear oaths in the name of the gods. He wouldn't risk his reputation as a new king by breaking his word. We must trust and cooperate with them to survive. I realized Xenophon was trying to convince himself. I sighed inwardly. The Greek mercenaries were in such a weak position that they had to swallow whatever poison was offered. Days passed. My field hospital took shape, and 7 of the 12 wounded soldiers showed significant improvement. I spent my spare time learning Greek from Xenophon and had Melsis buy linen to experiment with leggings. I also practiced combat drills with my teammates to synchronize my mind and body. After assists recovered and the men in mutiny, I grew closer to Antonius, seeking advice on hoplite formations and command. I also studied the characteristics of peltasts to master the glaive. The success of the field hospital cemented my reputation as God-favored, and my humility earned me widespread popularity throughout Menon's camp. As the Persians remained absent, anxiety and suspicion returned to the Greek camp. I kept busy to suppress my worries, focusing on self-improvement since I couldn't change the mercenaries' predicament. After 20 days, Tissaphernes finally arrived, accompanied by Orontes, the governor of Armenia, and his army. The anxious Greek leaders, lacking suspicion, immediately set out on the return journey with the Persians. The dynamic shifted instantly. Arius's troops, previously close allies of the Greeks, began marching and camping exclusively with the Persians. Over the past 20 days, the Persians had successfully persuaded Cyrus's commanders by promising them amnesty. Suspicious, the Greeks marched separately, trailing the Persians with their own guides. At dusk, they camped 10 miles apart, setting sentries as if facing enemies. Tissaphernes honored his promise, providing a market for the Greeks, though the mercenaries had to pay for their own supplies. Menon tried to cut food rations for my squad, but Melsis intervened. Melsis had become addicted to the massages I taught my Egyptian slaves, hoping to use the technique in his future brothels. Consequently, he catered to my needs to ensure the training continued. A few days later, they reached the massive Median Wall. Xenophon, who often visited me to stimulate his thinking, marveled at the structure, while I noted that Xenophon likely found his own camp boring. Xenophon remarked on the wall's history, noting that even the powerful Babylonian kingdom fell to the Medes, who were then conquered by the Persians. He mused that all kingdoms eventually perish and hoped to witness the fall of Persia in his lifetime. I recalled that in my past life, Alexander the Great would eventually destroy Persia. I remembered that Macedonia was currently a fragmented, hostile power. I gazed eastward, feeling a deep, unbridgeable longing for my lost homeland. When Helos called me, I snapped back to reality, blurting out, "Perhaps there is a country in the Far East, vast and populous, with a sophisticated, efficient system, elegant customs, and immense wealth." Xenophon dismissed this as a dream, citing Herodotus's records of India, Arabia, and the Scythians. "Did Hades give you this revelation?" he asked. I countered, "What lies beyond those lands? Did Herodotus confirm it himself?" Xenophon stammered, admitting Herodotus likely relied on hearsay. If it's hearsay, you cannot deny such a country exists, I argued. Xenophon looked at me strangely, noting my unusual seriousness. I smiled without replying. Olivarus, intrigued, sighed. How I wish I could see such a distant land. Xenophon teased. You'd have to cross Persia, the Scythians, who beheaded Cyrus, the one-eyed men, and mysterious India. If you survive, you'll find either an ocean or a great kingdom. Olivarus shrank back, silenced. Matones, annoyed by Xenophon's pedantry, declared, If I had a strong army, I'd go anywhere. Xenophon pointed at the loose, disorganized column with disdain. Like this one. A much stronger one, of course. Matones retorted. I watched them, pondering the idea of a stronger army. They passed through the Median Wall into fertile plains with golden wheat fields and complex irrigation canals. They reached the Tigris, a wide, bustling river filled with merchant ships and fishing boats. The Greeks camped near the city of Sidus, while the Persians crossed the river. The separation provided the Greeks with a rare, peaceful night of sleep. The next day, tension returned. I noticed armed guards at both ends of the floating bridge. Xenophon explained the situation. A messenger from Areus warned Clearchus that the Persians might attack at night and destroy the bridge to trap us between the river and the canals. Xenophon added proudly, I convinced the leaders that the message was a lie. How so? I asked. If the Persians attack and lose, they'd need the bridge to flee. If they win, we are already trapped in their land, so destroying the bridge is unnecessary. The leaders agreed. That makes sense, I admitted. Olivarus mocked. If you can figure that out, why would Tissaphernes tell such an obvious lie? Xenophon replied, because he fears we might destroy the bridge ourselves. This land is fertile enough to sustain us for months. If we stayed, the Persians would be in trouble. Empty, the Persians would be doomed. Matones laughed. Helos mused, so they really do want us gone. I kept my doubts to myself. I felt Tissaphernes was a cunning politician, and the Greeks, who favored direct force, were ill-equipped to handle such complex schemes. Xenophon, do you know our route? I asked. It's decided by the leaders, but we aren't going back the way we came. Menon's looting has made the locals hostile, but we will make it home. I felt frustrated by the looting. Do you know the geography of Persia, the cities, roads, and rivers? Xenophon admitted he didn't, but showed his papyrus scrolls, saying, I am recording everything to write a book so Greeks can understand Persia. I thought, I know you'll write the Anabasis, but that won't solve our current crisis. I wondered where to find someone who actually knew the terrain. Meanwhile, friction between the Greek and Persian soldiers grew as they competed for resources. At the Fiscus River, they encountered an army led by the king's brother, returning from a failed attempt to join the war. Clearchus ordered the Greeks into a defensive formation. The Persians, likely warned by Tissaphernes, marched past without incident, though the tension was palpable. I observed the Persian army, chariots with spears and bows, followed by cavalry. The horses were small, lacking saddles or stirrups, and the riders wore light tunics. The infantry marched in mixed formations, a large shield-bearer followed by a spearman and several archers. I concluded that the Persian army relied on mobility and ranged attacks. They were weak in close-quarters combat, explaining why they consistently lost to Greek hoplites. The armies passed each other without conflict. They entered Media, a rugged land that had once been the heart of a powerful empire, but now appeared desolate under Persian rule. As market supplies dwindled, camp conflicts increased. Helos praised my leggings, noting they prevented his legs from swelling during the long marches. That's because I am God-favored. Olivarus boasted. Even other squads are starting to copy my design. I remained silent, numb to the praise I received for my tactical improvements. I knew these minor adjustments to march conditions merely bolstered my influence in Menon's camp without changing the mercenaries' precarious fate. Davos, rumors are spreading that the Persians plan to enslave us for the king of Persia. Do you think it's true? Geogris asked from the corner. I had been pondering the same. Such rumors, spreading rapidly within days, clearly had an instigator behind them. Whether it was the Persians or their own men, the goal was to incite panic. I feigned calm, telling the concerned men, stay vigilant, but don't panic. We've been safe so far. Just then, someone entered the tent. Matoni's fighting again? Silas asked, noting the bruises on Matoni's face. Spitting blood, Matoni's grinned. The Persians aren't so tough. It took a dozen of us to beat their group of 20, but we sent them running. He sat down, rubbing his cheek, and added mysteriously, I didn't just go there to fight. I heard some news. What news? Silas asked. Matoni's announced, we're approaching Cyrus the Younger's mother's fiefdom. It's full of wealthy villages. Good food at last. Oliverus cheered. The others were excited, as rations had been scarce. The next day, Tissaphernes officially authorized the Greek mercenaries to plunder the region for supplies. While the others cheered, I was silent. Plundering these innocent people for Cyrus's rebellion was Tissaphernes' cruelty. By afternoon, Minon's mercenaries stormed a village. The village erupted in screams. I watched my comrades transform into greedy, violent bandits, killing men, kicking elders, and looting homes. Their distorted expressions of avarice were chillingly unfamiliar. I wandered like a ghost, ignored by the looting soldiers. I met the hateful glares of the dying and the desperate pleas of the elderly, feeling utterly powerless. I tried to retreat to solitude, telling myself this was the nature of war, until a scream shattered my thoughts. It was Oliverus. I rushed into a house to find a Persian man dead. Oliverus lay unconscious on the bed, while a 10-year-old girl stood trembling, clutching a heavy rock. I realized Oliverus had tried to assault the woman, only to be struck down by her daughter. Disgusted, I still checked. Oliverus, are you all right? The girl, startled by me, shrieked, bandits! Die! And charged at me with the rock. I reflexively blocked with my shield, exposing my spear. The girl ignored the blade, charging blindly. I felt a heavy weight. The girl collapsed onto me, her hands clawing at my face. The woman on the bed wailed in despair. I staggered back, watching the mother cradle her dying daughter. The sound of her grief felt like a knife to my heart, and I nearly fainted. Are you okay? Silas asked, steadying me. I'm fine, I replied, walking outside. Silas checked on Oliverus, then joined me, as I sat against a wall, staring blankly at the sky. After a long silence, I stood, let out a guttural, primal roar, and wept. I then asked, what about the woman? She's gone mad, Silas sighed. Perhaps madness is her only escape, I murmured. Oliverus is fine, just knocked out, Silas added. I said nothing, but the cold glint in my eyes made Silas shiver. We need to find someone who knows the local geography, I said. Silas hesitated. After what we did, they won't help us. There are ways, I replied coldly. By dusk, the mercenaries returned laden with loot. I had captured a Persian merchant, using his wife and daughter as leverage, a violation of Tissaphernes' orders that the camp ignored. I brought the captive back to camp. Are we heading northwest? I asked the merchant, Maligi, through an interpreter. The merchant nervously drew in the dirt. To reach Ionia, you must cross the Taurus Mountains, which is difficult. You're currently heading northwest. He continued, you'll likely cross the Dukya Mountains and Armenia to reach the Euxine Sea, then take ships to Aeolia. So Tissaphernes' route makes sense, Oliverus realized. I noticed Maligi flinch and glared at Oliverus. Shut up. Matoni's hissed, and Oliverus obeyed. I studied the map. Where will the march be most difficult? The Dukya Mountains, Maligi said. The Dukians are fierce, though your large army and Persian guides should pass. How do you know our army is large? I pressed. Maligi trembled. I saw your camps. I smiled. Don't be afraid. Do you know Tissaphernes? Maligi nodded frantically. I heard he once accused Cyrus of treason. Maligi avoided my gaze. One last question, I said. Where does the king of Persia's jurisdiction end? Maligi, eager to please me, pointed to a spot on his sketch. Here, past Mespala. Mespala. I scrutinized the map. It's the former Assyrian capital, Nineveh. Beyond it lies Dukya, Maligi emphasized. I nodded. You know Dukya well? I've traded grain for their mountain goods, Maligi replied, his face darkening. But they are treacherous barbarians. They often withhold payment, assault traders, and loot our goods. I turned to Matoni's. Take his family to the baggage train. Tell Mersis to guard them, but ensure they are neither abused nor treated as slaves. Maligi fell to his knees, sobbing. Please, spare me, my wife, and my daughter. I've told you everything. So you understand Greek, I remarked. Maliji only wailed in response. Keeping you here is for your own safety. Do you know that your lord, Cyrus the Younger, is dead? Maliji froze, his grip on my legs weakening. Prince Cyrus is dead? You suspected it. Why else would Tissaphernes bring us here and authorize the looting of your village as punishment for Cyrus's rebellion? This won't be the last of it. Anyone close to him is doomed. Maliji collapsed, catatonic. Matones dragged him away. He doesn't seem like an ordinary merchant, Silas observed. Agreed, I said. Between the hidden wealth, their refined air, and his fluency in Greek, Maliji was likely a high-ranking official or royal merchant hiding in the countryside after the rebellion failed. I, ignoring my own role in terrorizing the village headman, told Silas, "Tell Mercis again, no one touches his family. Since Cyrus is dead, I need him to defect to us willingly." The squad watched, accepting my authority as I issued orders to my captain. Understood, Silas replied, hurrying off. Pykersi, thank you for your help today, I said to the soldier. My honor, Pykersi replied, feigning modesty as he accepted 2 drachmas from me. Keep this quiet, especially from Menon, I instructed. Pykersi pocketed the coins, swearing by Hades to keep silent. I hate that guy anyway. Call me for the next job. Count on it, I laughed. As Pykersi left, Geogris asked, is he reliable? He's Menon's Persian translator. Menon speaks Persian himself, so Pykersi is just a glorified laborer for him. Oliverus interjected, trying to regain favor after his near-death experience. The room fell silent at his voice. Davos, how did you know the money was buried in the yard? Geogris asked. I seized the moment. Simple. When we captured Maliji, he kept glancing at the old tree in the yard. I checked, saw fresh soil, and scared him into confessing. The men praised my keen eye, with Oliverus being the loudest. This money is vital, I told Geogris. Check the baggage train daily so that fat Mercis doesn't skim off the top. Understood. The Greek mercenaries' baggage train grew increasingly bloated with each raid. Over the next few days, the army marched along the Tigris to Kini, securing supplies. However, mutual suspicion between the Greeks and Persians spiked, leading to frequent skirmishes. At the Zab River, a massive brawl broke out involving over 100 men and resulting in a dozen casualties, only ending when commanders intervened. The next day's march was canceled, and soldiers were confined to camp. I and my men finally caught up on sleep. Mercis spent the time processing looted livestock into sausages. Antonius burst into the tent, frantic. Davos, Menon, Clearchus, Proxenus, and the other commanders are heading to the Persian camp for negotiations. What? I bolted upright. Clearchus spent the night at the Persian camp and returned safely. He convinced the others to join him for further talks with Tissaphernes. Despite opposition from many officers, the commanders agreed to go. Why weren't we notified? Silas asked. Menon didn't consult us, Antonius said, embarrassed. He only took Capes and Millstick, the only captains still loyal to him. I heard the commotion from Socrates' camp, Antonius added. Who went? I asked, dressing rapidly. Clearchus, Proxenus, Menon, Socrates, Agis, and a dozen captains. Move. Take me to them. If we're too late, it's over. I sprinted out, followed by my men. Guards let me and Antonius pass, but blocked the others. I ignored the shouting, racing north until I spotted the commanders ahead. As Clearchus walked with Zysite, the brother of the Persian queen, shouts erupted from behind. Stop. It's a trap. A Persian conspiracy. The 5 generals, over 10 captains, and 200 soldiers escorting them froze, looking back in alarm. I rushed forward, breathless. It's a trap. Tissaphernes intends to wipe you all out. Without leadership, our entire army will be destroyed. The generals instinctively looked toward Zysite. Zysite roared at me. Who is this? Tissaphernes treated Clearchus with hospitality, and this is your gratitude? I shall report this insult to the king and advise him to cancel our agreement with the Greeks. The generals hurriedly blocked Zysite's horse, offering frantic apologies. I persisted. Even if a meeting was requested, why bring all the leaders? Don't you remember Tissaphernes' past treachery? His recent friendliness is merely to lull us into complacency. Menon lashed out. Insolent liar. You incite my soldiers against me and now try to sabotage our peace. Do you want us all to die? Seize him. The soldiers ignored Menen's order. Some recognized me as the rumored God-favored man from Menen's camp and hesitated. While the generals were initially wary of me, Menen's outburst turned them against me. To them, a common soldier challenging a commander was an unforgivable taboo. Clearchus, however, suspected Menen had staged this to disrupt the meeting, as Tissaphernes had promised to reveal who was spreading rumors within the mercenary ranks. Clearchus believed Menen was the traitor, having competed for command and colluded with Areus. He felt only he could lead the army home, and he was determined to expose Menen to solidify his authority. Clearchus ordered, "Since Menen says so, arrest this clown and hold him until we return." He declared, "I am going to negotiate with Tissaphernes. Those who trust me, follow, others may return." Soldiers seized me and Antonius. Clearchus marched north, followed by the other generals. Menen spat on me, sneering, "You're dead when I get back." Most soldiers followed, leaving only a few who knew of my miracles. Pinned to the ground, I shouted, "Clearchus, you fool! Your stubbornness will destroy us all. You won't even have time to regret this." As the generals faded into the distance, I sat dejectedly. I had misjudged Clearchus's stubbornness. I recalled the Spartan officer at the Battle of Plataea who refused to retreat, nearly costing the Greeks the war. The main force moved on, while the guards forced me back. The remaining soldiers gathered around to comfort me. Antonius asked, "Davos, are the generals truly in danger? What happens when sheep negotiate with wolves?" I sighed. The trap was classic. The generals' desire for peace had blinded them. My influence simply wasn't enough. "What do we do?" Antonius panicked. "We save ourselves." I suddenly remembered Xenophon. I realized the upcoming massacre of the leadership would force a total reorganization of the mercenary army. Regaining my resolve, I said, "Quick, let's go back." Menen, meanwhile, poisoned the other generals' minds against me, eager to eliminate his rival. Before reaching the Persian camp, most soldiers headed to the market. Inside the Persian camp, the atmosphere seemed normal, with Persian soldiers casually observing them, which eased the generals' remaining anxieties. At Tissaphernes' tent, Xycide announced, "Only the 5 generals may enter." Clearchus entered first. The tent was dim and crowded. Before he could react, a voice shouted, "Seize them!" Empty. 20 men rushed out, pinning the 5 generals and binding them with ropes. Outside, the unarmed Greek officers and soldiers were surrounded by armed Persians and slaughtered. "Congratulations, Governor. Your plan succeeded." The tent was lit, revealing the victors. Clearchus glared at Tissaphernes, roaring, "You despicable coward! You violated your oaths to Ahura Mazda. Do you not fear the gods or your king's disgrace?" Tissaphernes sipped wine, smiling. "The king left for Persepolis days ago. There was no peace treaty. I invented it. As for the gods, they will reward me for destroying these barbarians. And yes, I started the rumors myself." Clearchus was stunned. Proxenus spat at Tissaphernes, cursing him as a liar and a coward. Tissaphernes laughed. "Not a liar, a strategist. We Persians use our brains to win with minimal cost. I knew you wanted peace, so I staged conflicts and rumors to keep you compliant." He mocked them. "I knew you'd blame Menen. You were so desperate for peace that you walked right into my trap and delivered yourselves. Kill us and be done with it." Clearchus shouted. Menen, however, groveled. "Spare me. I'll be your slave. I'll convince the mercenaries to surrender and help you conquer Asia Minor." Tissaphernes narrowed his eyes. "Anything? Bark like a dog." Menen barked frantically. The Persians roared with laughter, while the other generals cursed him in shame. Menen ignored them, begging at Tissaphernes' feet. "Excellent." Tissaphernes clapped, walking toward Menen. Menen, hands bound, crouched on the ground, tongue lolling, barking even louder. Tissaphernes approached Menen, flashed a sinister smile, and swiftly decapitated him with a single stroke. Amidst the onlookers' screams, blood sprayed as Menen's head rolled, his face frozen in disbelief. "Fool, did you think I was unaware of your slanders before Cyrus the Younger and your attempt to attack my residence?" Tissaphernes stepped on the head, his face splattered with blood, cold as a god of death. The 4 remaining leaders stared in shock at the corpse. Even Clearchus, Menon's rival, felt a profound, shared grief. Preserve his head and send these four criminals to Persepolis for the king's judgment, Tissaphernes ordered. As the leaders were dragged away, Socrates lamented, "If only we had listened to that young man on the road." Clearchus remained silent. Areus arrived, and Tissaphernes granted him entry. Seeing the blood, Areus hesitated. Tissaphernes declared, "That is Menon's blood. I just took his head. By Rashnu, he deserved it." Areus exclaimed, then added, "Governor, I have followed your orders to have the cavalry hunt down all Greeks outside the camp." "Excellent. I shall report your merit to the king." Tissaphernes knew he needed to both intimidate and manipulate the 10,000-strong Greek force, relying on local nobles like Areus upon returning to Asia Minor. With the leaders captured, the Greeks are in chaos. You and Zysite go to their camp and force their surrender. Antonius wanted me taken to Menon's camp, where I would be safe. I refused, opting for Clearchus's camp, the northernmost vanguard, to stay informed. I sent Helos to fetch Xenophon, ordered Antonius to secure Menon's camp, and whispered a secret instruction to Metones, who nodded in surprise. As Helos left, I walked toward Clearchus's camp. My escort asked, "Is Clearchus truly in danger?" I asked, "Who is in charge in his absence?" "Captain Timasian. Tell him to prepare for defense." Suddenly, a guard shouted, "Look, Persian cavalry!" I and the soldiers saw countless Persian cavalry circling 100 meters away, kicking up dust amidst cries of agony. "What is this?" the soldiers asked nervously. I felt no triumph in my prediction. I realized war had arrived and felt the weight of the tension. "Back to the camp," I ordered, closing the gates. A soldier stumbled out of the dust, clutching a bleeding abdomen. I and the guards rushed to help him inside. "Persian cavalry, they ambushed us on the way to the market. Many are dead. Warn Achilles," the soldier gasped. Empty. Seeing the soldier's fatal wound, I told my men, "Take him to the medical corps in Menon's camp. Say I sent you." "The medical corps?" They carried the man south. The others looked at me, waiting for direction. I urged them, "Tell the officers that the Persians have broken their word and are slaughtering our men. The leaders are likely captured. Prepare for battle." As soldiers scattered, Xenophon arrived. I quickly briefed him. Xenophon looked devastated. I warned Proxenus, but he wouldn't listen, and I didn't insist. "Is he?" His voice choked. I nodded silently. Xenophon looked at the marauding cavalry. "We must rally the army. Attack the Persian camp and rescue them." "That's a bad idea," a sturdy man interrupted. "We've been at peace with them. The men won't accept a sudden siege. At least drive off the cavalry to save those outside," I suggested. The man glared. "Who are you?" "I am a soldier from Menon's camp. Officers decide strategy, not common soldiers," the man scolded. I fell silent. "Xenophon, return to your camp and tell Agathias to bring the troops," the man ordered. As they walked, I learned the man was Timasian, Clearchus's adjutant. Clearchus's camp was sluggish. Timasian had to shout and strike the men to assemble 500 troops. Before they left, other officers arrived. Cleaner, Xanthoparis, Agathias, and Menon's officers, Felicius, Antonius, and Capys, along with the Helos squad. Their arrival bolstered my confidence. The officers demanded I explain the situation, as I had witnessed everything. Timasian and others were stunned. Why did the officers of Menon's camp show such respect to a mere young soldier? Soldiers returning from the Persian camp spread word that I, the god-favored of Menon's camp, had warned Clearchus against the meeting, only to be ignored. This rumor quickly permeated the ranks. Facing the crowd's complex gazes, I calmly summarized the events. The officers quickly agreed. They must drive away the Persian cavalry to allow the remaining soldiers to return safely. As the troops formed up, I rejoined the Helos squad. Antonius suddenly shouted, "Davos, come to the front." I hesitated, but Capys and his teammates encouraged me, nudging me forward with excitement. Realizing the gravity of the moment, I pushed through the ranks as soldiers parted to clear a path for me. Antonius pulled me to the left of Felicius, the very front of Menon's army, and urged me to stay, citing the need for my guidance in potential future negotiations. Antonius entrusted me to Felicius, who readily accepted the responsibility. Standing in a commander's position for the first time, I felt a mix of excitement and awkwardness, which Felicius met with a gentle smile. I knew Felicius as a 45-year-old Thessalian, a seasoned, modest veteran. Menon had clearly chosen him as a deputy precisely because he lacked ambition, ensuring Menon's own authority remained unchallenged. This worked in my favor, as Felicius welcomed my presence. The Greek phalanx, consisting of 700 hoplites and 200 peltasts, began its advance. The Persian cavalry retreated, and the sounds of battle faded, though the sight of fallen comrades and the growing fear among the men remained palpable. "The enemy approaches," Felicius whispered. A Persian contingent appeared in the distance. I felt a surge of nervous anticipation. Was my first battle truly beginning? At 200 meters, a Persian cavalry unit rode forward, demanding in Greek that the commanders and officers come to hear the king's decree. The Greek ranks stirred, but no one moved. The memory of the recent betrayal made them deeply suspicious. The Persians repeated their demand, but the Greek line remained silent. Suddenly, I stepped out from the formation, shield and spear in hand, walking unhurriedly toward the enemy. The soldiers buzzed with curiosity. "Is that Davos, the god favorite of Hades? He's so young." As officers hesitated, Felicius followed to protect me, followed by Xenophon, who refused to be outdone by the youth. Timasian, Xanthoparis, Cleaner, Agathias, and others soon joined, masking their hesitation with bravado. I acted not out of fearlessness, but because I knew that in this crisis, only those who showed courage could command the respect of the panicked troops. I walked steadily, checking my flanks. Seeing the officers follow, I exhaled, realizing my hands were slick with sweat. Empty, near the Persians, Felicius identified the leaders: Areus, Artaeozus, Mithridates, Cyrus's former trusted aides, and the envoy Zysite. When the officers stopped 20 meters away, Areus gestured for them to come closer. Zysite sneered at their hesitation, calling them cowards. "We don't trust Persians who break their oaths," Xenophon retorted. "Shameless liars who deceive even the gods," Cleaner added, sparking a chorus of insults from the other officers. Areus shouted for silence, demanding they listen to the king's command. "That's your king, not ours," I shouted back. "Speak, or we leave. We are free Greeks, not slaves like you." Timasian roared. Areus, visibly incensed, read from a scroll. Artaxerxes declared Clearchus a traitor punished by the gods. He claimed the other leaders were being treated with honor by Tissaphernes and demanded the Greeks surrender their weapons, funded by the traitor Cyrus, in exchange for safe passage to Ionia, sworn by Ahura Mazda. I laughed loudly. A wolf tells the deer to break their horns so he can eat them safely? Only a fool would fall for this again. Is your king insane? Areus pointed at me, threatening me with death by fire for insulting the king. Cleaner erupted, calling them shameless traitors who had betrayed their oaths to Cyrus and were now conspiring with the heartless Tissaphernes. Areus faltered, then insisted the king was merciful and that Clearchus had been plotting against Tissaphernes, forcing their hand. Xenophon demanded they produce the other leaders to resolve the suspicion. The officers clamored in agreement, demanding to see their commanders. Areus stammered that they were drunk at a banquet, but Zysite impatiently threatened to withdraw all help if the weapons were not surrendered immediately. Greek warriors will never abandon their weapons. Timasian shouted, striking his shield. We will fight anyone who tries to take them. Cleaner added. Xenophon accused them of murdering the leaders, a charge that ignited the officers' fury. They want to kill us all. Revenge for our leaders. As the officers surged forward, the Persians fled. Zysite, humiliated by his retreat from barbarians, shouted back that the Greeks would soon regret their choice. We shall see who regrets it, Xenophon replied. With the Persians gone, the Greeks faced a grim reality. Their leaders were likely dead, and they were stranded in hostile territory. Surrender was not an option. They knew the fate of Cyrus and expected only death or slavery. They were forced to fight their way home across unknown lands, facing potential attacks and logistical nightmares. Morale plummeted as they returned to camp. In the War Council, I observed the officers' personalities. Xenophon argued passionately for electing new leaders and restoring the army's resolve, warning that chaos would destroy them before the Persians did. I agreed, drawing on my past experience as a leader to recognize the necessity of unified morale. Temasian, annoyed by Xenophon's assertiveness, dismissed him, insisting they wait for Clearchus's return. Empty. The mention of Clearchus brought a glimmer of hope. I, curious, asked Xenophon who he was. Xenophon explained the secret pact between Cyrus and Sparta, where Sparta provided military aid in exchange for naval funding. You mean Clearchus is a Spartan? I asked, stunned. Xenophon confirmed he was a Spartan emperor who had brought 700 hoplites, keeping a low profile after realizing Cyrus's true intent. I recalled the unique Spartan emperor system, powerful officials elected by the people to check the power of kings. The presence of a legitimate Spartan commander and 700 elite soldiers was a massive shift in their situation. I wondered with dark humor if they would be wearing the iconic red tunics. As they waited for Clearchus, nearly 200 officers gathered in the open space of the camp. Clearchus arrived, having been out foraging. He looked weary and saddened by the news of the missing leaders. His eyes scanned the crowd, stopping on the young, conspicuous me. Upon learning I was the god-favored of Minon's camp, Clearchus frowned, skeptical of such a young man holding a position of influence. Spartans valued experience and age, and Clearchus was unimpressed by the chaotic management of the mercenary army. I, in turn, found Clearchus underwhelming, a man who looked more like a common farmer than a legendary Spartan warrior. Clearchus addressed the assembly, asking for their advice. Silence fell over the group. Few had the courage or skill to speak before such a large assembly of veterans. I remained silent, choosing to observe rather than risk alienating the veterans with my youth and lack of status. Xenophon stood up, declaring that the Persians had betrayed them, murdered their leaders, and demanded their surrender. He warned that the soldiers were currently paralyzed by fear and confusion. Unless they regained their courage to fight, the entire army faced annihilation. He urged the officers to step up, noting that their status and pay came with the responsibility to lead. They must display unwavering resolve to stabilize the troops and restore their confidence. Xenophon proposed electing new commanders to replace the fallen, organize the army, and lead them safely back to Greece under Zeus's protection. His speech resonated with the crowd, drawing applause. Xenophon glanced briefly at the cold-faced Temasian before looking away. Realizing they had no other choice, Clearchus stood and urged the officers to return to their camps immediately, elect new leaders, and prepare for a joint military council. He announced a full army assembly for that afternoon and abruptly departed. I, sensing the shift, rose with Antonius and the others as the officers hurried back to their respective camps. Upon returning to Minon's camp, the soldiers anxiously swarmed them, demanding news. Antonius deliberately escalated the situation, confirming the deaths of Clearchus and Minon and the Persian demand for surrender, which the officers had rejected. The soldiers were thrown into a panic. Their last hopes for peace were shattered. Felicius loudly declared that they must immediately elect a new leader to guide them home. As he finished, Assists, the young man I had saved, raised his hand and shouted, "Brothers, who predicted Cyrus the Younger's death?" The soldiers responded in unison, "Davos," as Assists listed my achievements, inventing smoked meat sausages to prevent starvation and establishing the medical corps. "Who warned us that the meeting was a trap?" Assist shouted. "Davos," the soldiers roared, hailing me as the god-favored of Hades who would lead them home. Assist pointed at me, screaming, "Who is our new leader?" The camp erupted in a deafening, continuous chant of Davos. Felicius and the captains were stunned. I feigned surprise, though I noted Matones and Geogrus's involvement. The effect of Assist's orchestration exceeded my expectations. Forced to respond, Felicius consulted the captains before asking the soldiers if they were certain about their choice. The soldiers reaffirmed their decision, demanding the guidance of the god-favored. Felicius and the captains, including Amyntas and Alexis, reluctantly nodded in agreement. Felicius solemnly announced that, by the will of the soldiers and the consent of the officers, I was their new leader. The camp erupted in cheers. I felt a surge of relief and excitement. My efforts had paid off. I had bypassed the ranks to become a leader of over 1,000 men. I was no longer a pawn, but a player, ready to shoulder the responsibility. I raised my right arm to the cheering crowd. Minen's camp had suffered the fewest losses, and with the old leadership gone, the transition was swift. I held my first meeting with the 13 captains. Felicius, no longer an adjutant, waited outside. I faced the captains, maintaining a stern silence until the room grew quiet. My composed, commanding presence forced the skeptical officers to respect me. I thanked them for their trust, promising to prove their choice correct through my actions. My confidence surprised some, while others like Antonius and Capys smiled in approval. I appointed Felicius as my adjutant, a move that reassured those worried about my lack of experience. Felicius entered, thanked me, and took his seat. I then ordered the formal inclusion of Hirpulesi, the medical officer, into military meetings. Amyntas objected, arguing that doctors had no place in military strategy. I countered that in the coming battles, we needed to coordinate medical logistics, resources, and manpower to protect our wounded. Amyntas conceded, and the proposal passed. I then successfully proposed that Mercis, in charge of the baggage train, also attend to ensure the security of our food and loot. Felicius nudged me, signaling a missing role. I realized I had forgotten a herald, the vital link for military communication. I appointed assists as herald, rewarding his loyalty and utilizing his familiarity with the camp's operations. The candidate was approved, and Antonius summoned assists. Assists expressed his gratitude and immediately began his duties, calling for Hirpulesi and Mercis. The new leadership of Minen's camp was now fully assembled. To unite our brothers, we must first assess our current state. Please report on your respective personnel and supplies, I instructed, scanning the room. After a brief silence, the captains reported one by one. Mercis was particularly long-winded regarding the baggage train, forcing me to request brevity. I took notes. I summarized. We have 10 hoplite platoons, 1,094 men, and 4 peltask platoons, 487 men. Total, 1,581 soldiers, all well-equipped and healthy. The medical corps has 3 doctors and 6 female slaves, with 2 pack animals. Only Hirpulesi is proficient in trauma care. The baggage train has 50 guards, 273 slaves, 198 female, 75 male, 29 pack horses, 18 oxen, 56 sheep, 37 poultry, and 580 bags of flour. Our treasury holds 1 talent, 30 minas, and 5 drachmae. I asked if anything was missed. The captains were stunned. Most mercenaries were uneducated and incapable of such organized calculation. Mercis applauded. Davos, your mental math is incredible. Far better than mine. Antonius, knowing Davos was illiterate, glanced at the scroll. Seeing the strange symbols, he felt a sense of awe. The captains exchanged looks, their respect for me growing. No objections? Felicius and I will attend the general meeting. Captains, inspect your gear and prepare for battle. Leave the 10th hoplite platoon to guard the camp. The rest will march to the assembly in order. Keep order to prevent chaos. I then turned to Hirpulesi. Prepare a plan for the wounded. We need more bandages and double the support staff. Hirpulesi, who viewed Davos as a mentor for his unique medical insights, promised to follow my instructions and seek help if needed. You are our Asclepius, I smiled. We will support you. If you need labor, ask the captains. For supplies, see Mercis. The others pledged their support to the medical corps. Mercis reported, I've turned some sheep into smoked meat sausage. Shall I process the remaining livestock to stock up for the march? Mercis, you are our steward. We trust you with the food, I said. Agreed. Mercis manages the baggage train well, Antonius noted, while Epitines joked about the cost of the meat. Mercis retorted, You wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. You only care for boys. The room erupted in laughter, easing the tension. I turned to my deputy. Felicius, anything to add? Felicius, feeling awkward before his younger leader, asked, First, will our march route change? Second, we've been the rear guard. We shouldn't be stuck with that duty again. The others agreed. No more rear guard duty. I will argue our case at the general meeting, I promised confidently. Outside, Epitines marveled. I can't believe this is his first time as a leader. Zippite added, He's detailed, organized, and commanding. Even the veterans didn't dare challenge him. Lysimachus laughed. He's better than Menon, who was just a snake. Amintas cautioned. He must prove himself in battle to be truly qualified. Alexis reassured them. He's smart, and with Felicius assisting, he'll be fine. Zipite shouted. We'll handle the fighting. Davos just needs to use his God-favored status to keep us safe. Capua told Antonius. Davos has won their approval. Antonius replied. He still needs to prove himself in combat, but I have faith in him. I stood at the entrance, contemplating military management. The Greek mercenary structure mirrored city-state armies. I, commanding over 1,000, was effectively a general. I knew that managing 14 captains directly was inefficient. I considered reforming the structure but decided against it for now to avoid alienating the officers. I turned to Mercis. They're gone. What is it? Empty, Mercis whispered. Davos, I've been taking good care of that Persian family you sent to the baggage train. Is that so? I smirked. How should I thank you? Mercis chuckled nervously. It's my duty. Also, Menon left nearly 2 talents of silver in the baggage train. 2 talents was a fortune. I, still adjusting to the currency, asked calmly. Did Menon have any direct heirs? Mercis observed me, noting my calm demeanor. Realizing my intent, he felt a surge of respect and replied, No. Any will. None. He never expected to die so young. I mused. Menon built this camp with great effort. Let's use his remaining funds for the camp's development. Davos, you are truly selfless. Mercis praised, then rubbed his hands, asking, Did Hades inspire your rapid calculation skills? I, realizing Mercis had been waiting to ask, replied, Of course. Can you teach me? Mercis pleaded. Impressed by the older man's thirst for knowledge, I agreed, Certainly. You are the best leader. Mercis hugged me. Though initially stiff due to Greek cultural norms regarding physical contact, I realized it was merely gratitude and accepted the man as a loyal supporter. By afternoon, I and Felicius arrived at the command tent, finding only Clearchus and Timasian present. Clearchus frowned at me. You're from Menon's camp. Who is your elected leader? He looked toward Felicius. Before I could speak, Felicius gestured to me. We have unanimously elected me as our new leader. Clearchus and Timasian were stunned. Timasian scoffed. We're about to fight the Persians. You bring a child to drag us down? Do you realize people will die? Timasian glared at me, clearly trying to intimidate me. I stood my ground. Who drags whom down remains to be seen. Force alone won't defeat the Persians. If you had listened to me earlier, we wouldn't be in this mess. I tried to stop them too, Timasian stammered, his guilt over Clearchus's capture making him defensive. Felicius added, Our entire camp supports me. I am his adjutant, here to assist him. Clearchus asked, And who is this? Felicius, Menon's former adjutant and the camp's actual manager. Timasian remarked sarcastically. Clearchus nodded knowingly. I ignored their judgment, confident that time would prove my worth. You certainly chose quickly, Clearchus noted dryly. I replied, In this crisis, unity is better than chaos. Clearchus, surprised by the youth's eloquence, offered a stiff, Welcome. Glad to fight alongside you. I replied. The tent fell silent. Minutes later, Xanthoparis arrived, replacing Socrates as leader. Cleaner replaced Achilles. Finally, Hieronymus replaced Proxenus, accompanied by Xenophon, who served as his adjutant. Everyone was surprised by my youth, but time was short. Clearchus began. We must decide our retreat. I proposed the original route, north along the Tigris, through Armenia to the Euxine Sea, then by ship to Aeolia. Xanthoparis objected. That's Tissaphernes's route, a trap. The northern barbarians are dangerous. Timasian countered. What's your alternative? West. We're at war with Persia. Staying here is suicide. The north is our best chance to escape. I noted that Xanthoparis and the others seemed swayed by the argument. All in favor of the northern route. Clearchus asked. It was unanimous. Clearchus continued. To consolidate our strength, I suggest merging smaller units like those of Suaxisai and Passion into our ranks, voluntarily. Hieronymus asked, How will we handle supplies and assets? It's voluntary. Negotiate the details privately. Timasian snapped. I considered the benefits. More troops meant a better chance of survival. Clearchus drew a diagram in the dirt. To protect our baggage, we'll use a hollow square formation. 2 units in front, 2 on the flanks, 2 in the rear. No content. I realized the formation was slow but necessary to protect the non-combatants from Persian harassment. The group crowded around the sketch. Temasian pointed to the front. Clearchus and his Spartans are the most experienced. They should lead. No one objected. Next, Temasian pondered his own position. Since I am the youngest, I will take the rear guard, I declared passionately. Felicius panicked, thinking, he forgot our plan. He's too young and reckless. Felicius tried to signal me to stop, but it was too late. Temasian protested my offer to serve as rear guard, insisting the role required immense experience to avoid endangering the entire army. He insisted his own camp take the position. I immediately countered, offering to serve as rear guard alongside Temasian. Temasian flatly refused, instead appointing his comrade Cleaner to join him. Cleaner agreed to the arrangement. Felicius realized I had intentionally baited Temasian into the role, proving my tactical cunning. Clearchus, annoyed by my maneuvering, assigned my camp to the left flank, which bordered the Tigris River and was considered the safest position. I noted Clearchus's open contempt but accepted the assignment silently. Clearchus then proposed Xanthoparis join him as vanguard. Due to internal leadership disputes within Proxenus's camp, Clearchus assigned them to the right flank to ensure stability. With the council concluded, the leaders prepared for the General Assembly. Clearchus urged the leaders to focus on morale-boosting rhetoric during the assembly. Clearchus remained skeptical of the young Davos, fearing he might turn the crucial assembly into a disaster. Clearchus suggested Felicius speak instead, but I insisted on addressing the troops myself. Reluctantly, Clearchus placed me second in the speaking order as a safety measure, given the size of my contingent. It was late summer, and the afternoon heat had begun to wane. A wooden platform was erected in the center of the camp. Soldiers gathered in a noisy, restless crowd as Clearchus's party arrived under guard. Clearchus took the stage first, causing a stir among the troops. Most soldiers were unfamiliar with Clearchus and whispered, wondering who he was. A dozen loud-voiced soldiers stood around the platform to relay the speaker's words to the masses. Clearchus introduced himself as an Ephor from Sparta. The revelation stunned the crowd. The presence of a Spartan official among them transformed their fear into hope and curiosity, quieting the assembly. The soldiers fell silent as Clearchus commanded their attention. Clearchus spoke of their dire situation, the betrayal by Areus, and the need to fight the Persians with Greek courage to return home, invoking Zeus's favor. He kept his speech brief. As they passed, Clearchus noted my calm demeanor, but wondered why I brought a herald carrying a bundle of sticks. The herald was overwhelmed by the vast, roaring crowd, feeling like a tiny boat in a storm. Trembled uncontrollably, fearing the platform would collapse. The crowd jeered, mocking me as a child who should be home with his mother. The soldiers questioned the sanity of the camp that elected such a young leader. I stood firm in the center of the platform, while the other leaders felt a reluctant sense of solidarity against the hostile crowd. Temasian regretted allowing me to take the stage, calling it a hellish situation. The other leaders agreed, and Clearchus prepared to have the next speaker replace him. Suddenly, a thunderous chant of Davos erupted, silencing the jeers. The leaders realized the cheers came from my own men, who had rebranded their camp under my name. I smiled and introduced myself as the new leader from Thessaly, replacing Menon. My soldiers cheered, leaving the rest of the army bewildered. Rumors spread through the crowd that I was a god favorite of Hades whose oracles were always true. Others claimed I had miraculously saved dying soldiers. Some noted my practical inventions, like the leggings they wore. The soldiers' contempt shifted to curiosity. I then joked that Clearchus's speech was like a man finishing too quickly during intimacy, leaving the woman unsatisfied. The crowd erupted into laughter at the crude, unexpected humor. While the soldiers found me amusing, Temasian and the other leaders were scandalized by my vulgarity. Xenophon was surprised, as I was usually polite and sophisticated. Clearchus, however, was not offended. He recognized that I had successfully bridged the gap with the common soldiers, making them receptive to what followed. I pivoted to my main point, asking why the Persians, despite their superior numbers, had not yet attacked them after the death of Cyrus the Younger. The Persians lured our leaders to their deaths with false peace and food, I declared. Who is truly afraid? It is the Persians. They fear our valor and dare not face us in open battle, resorting to cowardly treachery and breaking their sacred oaths. They killed our leaders yet fear to attack, hoping we will surrender. Why fear such cowards? Greeks never yield. When Darius conquered these lands and turned his eyes to our small city-states, did Greece surrender? No, came scattered replies. Too soft. Did Greece surrender? I warred. No. The response was unified. Still sounds like cowardly Persians. Again, did Greece surrender? And no, the soldiers bellowed, their spirits ignited. Correct. At Marathon, the Athenians crushed the Persians, forcing Darius to flee. His son Xerxes returned with a massive host, but we never bowed to tyranny. Tell me, where did we strike them down? The soldiers shouted. Salamis. Plataea? Thermopylae. I continued. United, we secured our freedom and prosperity. Who among you can name the heroes who fought those battles? Miltiades, Aeschylus, Pheidippides, Leonidas, Themistocles, Aristides, Pausanias. Names poured forth from the crowd. The mercenaries, many descendants of those veterans, felt a surge of pride. Even leaders like Xanthoparis, Cleaner, and Hieronymus joined in. Timasian watched, realizing he had underestimated this youth. As the roar faded, I pressed on. These names are immortal, written in history by Herodotus. We grew up idolizing them, longing for such glory. Now, soldiers, you have the same chance to become heroes. The eager soldiers stood up. Tell us, what chance? Our ancestors fought on Greek soil or at sea, but never invaded Persia. We are deep in their heartland. If we unite, defeat them, and return home, we make history. Our tales will be sung, and our descendants will honor us. I breathed deeply. Our success will show future Greeks that Persia is a giant of clay. When war comes again, they will follow our path, conquer, and honor our sacrifices. The soldiers listened, spellbound. They will say, Great ancestors, your valor gave us the strength to achieve this unprecedented feat. Will that day come? Timasian whispered, fists clenched. The leaders were captivated, unaware that decades later, Alexander of Macedonia would use this very retreat to inspire his own conquest. I took a wooden stick from assists and shifted my tone. But first, we must return home safely. I won't lecture on tactics. You are all veterans who defeated Athens. You are far superior to the pampered Persians. Xenophon smirked. Alone, we are like this stick, easily broken. I snapped one, then another. I grabbed a bundle and asked a tall soldier, Brother, your name? Urbites. Try to break this. Urbites strained until his face turned red, but the bundle remained intact. I patted his shoulder, and Urbites sheepishly scratched his head. You see, a single stick is weak, but together, even the strongest warrior cannot break us. Xenophon nodded, grasping the intent. Soldiers shouted, Unity. It's unity. Yes, unity. I declared. We come from different cities, but we are one blood. Our petty conflicts must melt away. Trust your brothers, protect each other's backs, and pool your wisdom. Don't leave every problem to the generals. Let us act as one man. Our strength will be that of Ares, our wisdom that of Athena. We will crush all obstacles. I raised my fists. Together, we create miracles. Every step is history. The crowd erupted in earth-shaking cheers. Davos! Davos! They chanted, some weeping, begging me to speak more. As I stepped down, soldiers hoisted me up, passing me overhead like a victorious general. Cleaner stood stunned. The soldiers' morale was so high that further speeches seemed redundant. At least in oratory, he surpasses us all, Xanthoparis admitted. War isn't won with words, but with spears and shields, Timasian grumbled. Xenophon felt a pang of jealousy, having prepared his own speech. Clearchus, though traditionally wary of Athenian eloquence, admitted Davos had exceeded expectations. Even Amyntas, once critical of the kid, told Antonius, Our new leader isn't half bad. Antonius smiled. Finally, Clearchus took the stage to announce the march north and final preparations. The assembly concluded. Soldiers dispersed, still praising my speech and my reputation as the God-favored. My men escorted their new leader back to camp, proudly broadcasting my achievements to those who had stayed behind. Escaping the crowd, I returned to my old tent before realizing I now belonged in Menon's quarters. At my new tent, Mercis stood guard, looking strange. Davos, someone is waiting inside. Who? You'll see. Mercis replied with a lewd smirk. I entered to find a tall, graceful woman. Despite my travels, I had never seen anyone so captivating. I swallowed hard, wondering where Mercis had found her. Empty, she turned, revealing golden hair, piercing blue eyes, and delicate features. Even with my modern memories, I was mesmerized. Honorable Leader Davos, I am Calixitoya, she said. I stammered, my mind blank as I tried to place her. Calixitoya, unfazed by my reaction, stepped forward. I am the daughter of the Miletus noble Polonifusi and a concubine of Prince Cyrus. I seek your protection. A concubine of Cyrus? I recalled Oliverus's mention of her. You're the woman who escaped the Persians after Cyrus was killed. I immediately regretted my bluntness. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. It is fate, she said sadly. I am lucky to have escaped. My sisters were not. Her sorrow stirred my heart, though I chided myself for my lack of composure. Unnerved by the proximity, I coughed and asked, where were you before? Clearchus protected me for Cyrus's sake. But now, I remained sharp. Clearchus is dead, but Temasian is the new leader. Why not stay with him? We are at war with Persia now. You are safe. Temasian lacks Clearchus's authority, she said, blushing and on the verge of tears. He cannot stop those who wish to humiliate me. I realized the political optics. My call for unity might be undermined if I were seen stealing a woman from Temasian's camp. Sensing my hesitation, she grabbed my hand. I heard you are the god-favored of Hades, respected by all. Please help me. I caught her scent and fought the urge to embrace her. I will help you, I said, stepping back and calling for my herald. Assists, come in. Calixitoya jumped back, blushing deeply. Assists entered, stunned by the sight. Go to Clearchus, I ordered. Tell him Calixitoya, Cyrus's concubine, wishes to join our march, and ask if he agrees. Assists, did you hear me? Assists snapped out of his daze. Yes, I understand. Then go. I barked. Assist snuck one last look before fleeing. Don't blame him, I teased. You are too charming. Calixitoya smiled. You are younger than him, yet you remain composed. I laughed awkwardly, and silence fell. Will Clearchus agree? She asked anxiously. Likely. You are free, not a slave. You have the right to choose. I don't like Spartans, she replied. I felt an inexplicable sense of relief. Hearing she was free moved her. Where are you from, Davos? Just Davos, I corrected. I am from Thessaly, a village near Macedonia. Are your parents worried about you being a mercenary? They are dead. I am so sorry. It's fine, I said, though the mention of parents triggered a wave of melancholy for my past life. Calixitoya watched me, feeling both a maternal urge to protect me and a strange attraction to my mysterious, mature calm. Is it true you are the god-favored of Hades? She asked, then immediately apologized for her boldness. I smiled. Do you believe it? I do, she replied quickly. I smiled, remarking that while gods provide comfort against fear, relying on them instead of one's own efforts only accelerates ruin. Calixitoya listened, thoughtful, as the two found an unexpected rapport. For me, the conversation offered a rare release from the pressures of my new reality. Calixitoya, a Miletus noble's daughter, had suffered a life of neglect and betrayal, eventually being gifted to Cyrus the Younger by her father. After Cyrus's death, she fled to Clearchus's camp, where she felt constantly threatened by the predatory gazes of the guards and captains. She poured out her grievances to me just as Assists arrived with the army's herald, Tormid. Assists reported that Tormid had come on behalf of Clearchus to verify the situation. Tormid stepped forward to salute. I nodded, understanding that Clearchus needed confirmation that Calixitoya had sought refuge voluntarily and was not being coerced. Tormid, the army's top herald, professionally questioned Calixitoya. Upon receiving her confirmation, he told me that the other leaders insisted on protecting her as a gesture of respect for Cyrus's past aid to Greece, urging me to ensure her safety. I privately suspected they were more concerned with Cyrus's ties to Sparta, then asked about Temasian's stance. Tormod assured me that Temasian had no objections. I agreed and ordered Assists to have Mercis settle Calixituoia into her new quarters. Assists complied enthusiastically, while Calixituoia left with a calm expression. I called out, offering my help if she ever faced difficulties. Calixituoia smiled faintly in response. Once they left, Tormod joked that I, the god-favored, had a knack for attracting the camp's most beautiful woman. I laughed, complimenting Tormod's skill at flattery. Tormod then noted that my tent lacked guards. I admitted I hadn't arranged them yet, fearing it might distance me from the soldiers who elected me. Tormod sternly corrected me, noting that military regulations exist for victory and security. He warned that after Clearchus's death, my safety was paramount, and guards would also prevent unnecessary interruptions. I thanked him for the advice. Tormod, impressed by my humility, expressed confidence in my future as a leader. Tormod's encouragement dispelled my final doubts. After Tormod left, I ordered Assists to have Antonius assign the Helos squad as my personal guard. Assists agreed, and I asked him to point out any future oversights. Assists suggested adding 2 more messengers, noting that one person couldn't efficiently manage 14 captains, the baggage train, and the hospital during battle. I agreed, telling him to recruit men and coordinate with Mercis for horses. I greeted the arriving Helos squad warmly. Helos saluted me. I hugged them, insisting they use my name in private. Matones praised my loyalty, contrasting me with Menon. I joked about the increased burden of their new duties. Matones promised that as guards, they would ensure no one harmed me. I lightened the mood by threatening to cut their rations if I got hurt. Matones jokingly complained, drawing laughter from the group. Helos promised to organize the guard duties properly. I nodded. I then summoned Maligi to serve as my guide. Shaken by Clearchus's death and no longer fearing the Persians, Maligi readily agreed. I gathered intelligence on the terrain and the Dukians. Seeing Matones guarding the tent with 2 short javelins strapped to his back, I paused. I had previously proposed javelins for the hoplites to counter Persian cavalry, but they had been discarded by most as dead weight. Only the Helos squad kept them, modifying them for easier carry. I hoped they would prove useful in upcoming battles. I spent a restless night, anxious about my first command. Assists woke me the next morning. I asked the time, and Assists served me a hearty breakfast. I asked if the soldiers were eating the same. Assists confirmed they were, noting the need for strength before the day's potential combat. I felt relieved. After a meal, a long bronze horn blast echoed through the camp. I donned my armor, swapping my helmet for one adorned with red feathers. Soldiers emerged to dismantle tents and load the baggage train, shouting orders to organize their units amidst the din of livestock. The camp resembled a chaotic marketplace, filled with cries and the sounds of animals being harnessed. After a long delay, Adjutant Felicius reported the army ready. I ordered the departure. Observing the sluggish hour-long assembly, I realized the lack of discipline compared to my past life, dampening my initial excitement as a leader. Lacking military prestige, I could only observe and plan for future reforms, knowing the path to restructuring would be long. As half the troops cleared the camp, Felicius urged me to depart. I mounted my horse, aided by my muscle memory from my Thessalian body. I spurred the horse into a trot, moving forward with ease. Following Tormod's advice, I sat tall to project authority, deciding to prioritize my image as a leader over populist gestures. Filled with ambition, I led my retinue, followed by the Helos squad, toward the army's rendezvous point. I realized that sluggishness was a systemic flaw among the mercenaries. As I passed other units, some soldiers jeered at my youth, but I ignored them, focused on moving forward. I studied Clearchus's Spartan unit, impressed by their silent, disciplined, and lethal formation, a stark contrast to the rest. I admired their elite status, later learning that only a third were true Spartans, the rest being periokoi. Smaller mercenary groups had joined Clearchus, leaving my unit isolated, which I found frustrating. I organized my troops into a flexible formation, heavy hoplites on the outside, light infantry inside, with the baggage train protected in the center. After another hour, the final horn sounded, and the army began its march. The pace was slow, hampered by the baggage train and the limitations of oxen and horses. I noted Mercis managing the baggage train and spotted Calixituoya among the women, her presence standing out. She glanced at me, and I quickly looked away, noting the agonizingly slow march. Felicius hoped for no Persian interference, but a commotion erupted at the rear. I immediately dispatched a messenger to investigate. The messenger returned. The Persian general Mithridates was nearby with 30 cavalry, shouting for their surrender. A psychological attack, I realized. Felicius dismissed the threat, believing the mercenaries wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. I ordered continued surveillance and sent another messenger for updates. Reports came in. Over 20 soldiers had already defected to Mithridates. I worried the lack of unity in units like Hieronymus's would trigger a snowball effect of desertions. Mithridates moved to the rear, inciting more defections from Cleaner's unit. I and Felicius watched with growing alarm. Mithridates was circling the formation, and my unit was next. Suoxisai lamented their lack of cavalry to drive the Persians away. Matones suggested using javelins, but the others noted the Persians were out of range. I realized the futility of a direct javelin attack. A sudden idea struck me. I questioned the messenger about the distance and the Persians' behavior. The Persians stayed stationary at 100 meters, even as defectors approached. I pondered the information and proposed a plan to Felicius. I outlined my strategy, leaving Felicius stunned. Felicius hesitated, calling it risky but potentially viable. I insisted on the attempt and briefed the Helos squad, who agreed to the gamble. I then declared I would join the assault myself. Felicius immediately objected to the leader taking such a risk. I laughed off the danger, citing my status as God-favored and my bond with my men, silencing their protests. Matones cheered, ready to live or die together. Oliverus joined in, eager to show the courage of the Thessalian warriors. A messenger arrived. Mithridates is circling Timasian's flank, shouting to them. Only 3 soldiers have surrendered. Such was the enduring influence of Clearchus's command, even after his death. Mithridates is coming. No time to waste. Felicius, hold this position for me. I urged. Fine. Felicius agreed reluctantly. Assists, notify the captains to prepare. Understood. Assists shouted excitedly. Helos squad, follow me to the front. The men roared, drawing curious glances from nearby soldiers. Report, Epher. Mithridates has flanked my unit. Clearchus heard Tormid's report and instinctively looked toward his own flank. Even units led by prestigious commanders like Cleaner and Timasian were deserting. Could this inexperienced youth hold his men together? Clearchus worried. Tormid, go to Timasian immediately. Have him send Cretan archers to attack Mithridates. He finally decided. Yes. Tormid rode off. Young man, hold on. I, wearing a common helmet with my Helos squad, stood in the front rank. Our javelins were hidden behind our shoulders as we faced west, tensely watching the rear. Assist squeezed in beside me. Leader, I've relayed your orders. As your herald, let me fight alongside you, he requested solemnly. I nodded. Leader, they're here. Helos whispered. Hoofbeats grew clear. 30 light cavalry appeared, led by a man in shimmering scale armor, Mithridates. I gripped my bronze shield. Damn coward, Matones muttered. Greek warriors, I am Mithridates, friend of Cyrus the Younger, he shouted from 200 meters away, his cavalry repeating his words in Greek. I am also Menon's friend. I am friendly to you, especially Menon's soldiers. I've visited your camp often. Clearchus was punished for breaking the treaty, but you haven't. The peace treaty holds. Join us. I swear by Barom, god of war, I mean no harm. We will send you safely to Asia Minor. Governor Tissaphernes wishes to hire you again with rich rewards. Honey-tongued Persian, don't think we'll fall for it. Assist spat. I whispered. Ready, go. The Helos squad shouted. Is it true we can go home? Will you really not hurt us? How much will Tissaphernes pay? After a stir, they shouted. We surrender. They dropped their shields and spears, running toward Mithridates. A nearby hoplite squad followed suit, throwing down weapons and merging with the Helos squad. General, look. Many are surrendering, a cavalryman cheered. Of course. Menon and Areus are close. Let's keep shouting. Mithridates said, emboldened by his success. I watched the cavalry closely. 2 Persian riders galloped toward us, making my heart tighten. "Run to the right," they shouted in fluent Greek, gesturing for the soldiers to follow. "Ignore them. Speed up," I urged. The sudden acceleration of the Greek soldiers confused Mithridates. A cavalryman shouted in panic. "No, they have javelins on their backs." They were now within 30 meters. "Ready," Helos shouted. The squad drew their javelins and stepped forward. Damn it, Mithridates tried to turn his horse. It was too late. Matones and the others threw their javelins with such force they stumbled from the momentum. Amidst the Persian screams, 10 javelins struck. Mithridates was hit multiple times, and his horse collapsed, pierced through the neck. As the Persians panicked, the Helos squad rose and threw a second volley, downing 2 more riders. Antonius watched from afar, shouting, "Success! They did it!" The soldiers cheered. "Go support leader Davos," Capys urged. As the squads prepared to retreat, Mithridates moved, struggling to free his leg from his horse. His thick armor had saved his vitals. He was 20 meters away, and the remaining cavalry watched from a distance. "Finish him," I charged. The soldiers followed, grabbing discarded javelins and spears. Matones threw a spear, downing a rider attempting a rescue, scaring the rest away. Mithridates looked up, blood in his mouth, and smiled bitterly. "You won't escape." I said nothing, driving my spear into the man's throat. "Go, run." Helos pulled me back, and the soldiers retreated. The Persian cavalry returned, archers firing. They retrieved Mithridates' body and split into 2 groups to flank the Greeks. "Watch for arrows," Helos shouted, signaling the men to scatter. I hesitated, was tackled from behind, and heard a cry of pain. It was Olivarus. Matones and Georgis grabbed us both, running in a zigzag pattern. Arrows flew, followed by 2 more cries of pain. The support unit arrived. Peltas threw javelins while hoplites raised a shield wall to block the arrows. The 20 Persians, unwilling to fight, fled with Mithridates' body. I checked on Olivarus, who shook off Georgis' help. "Leader, I gave him a firm hug. "Good brother, thank you." Olivarus smiled, his tension fading, until the pain hit. "Ouch." I pulled away, fearing I'd touched the wound. "Hey, Olivarus, lucky you were hit in the ass. If it were the front, you'd be screaming much louder." Matones mocked. "Damn you, Matones. You think you're brave? Try taking an arrow to the rear next time." Olivarus retorted, clutching his wounded backside. The Scylla squad erupted into their usual bickering. Beyond Olivarus, 2 other soldiers were hit, one in the thigh and another in the back, though his thick breastplate prevented serious injury. "Georgis, take Olivarus and the others to Herculesi for treatment," I ordered, patting Olivarus on the shoulder. "Get well and return to the fight soon." "Yes, leader," Olivarus replied loudly. "An outstanding raid. We were worried sick, but you actually pulled it off." "Indeed. Killing Mithridates avenges Menon's men. The entire mercenary force owes you a debt. Timasian and the others called us crazy for choosing you as leader. Let's see what they say now." Felicius, Antonius, and Capua congratulated me, while Amyntas offered a sharp military salute. Assists quickly brought a horse for me to mount. Soldiers cleared a path, cheering for my return. "What? Davos killed Mithridates?" Timasian stammered to the messenger, disbelieving. "Spreading false rumors during wartime is a punishable offense." "Davos killed Mithridates," Xenophon exclaimed. "He devised a bold plan, and it actually worked." "Excellent." Hieronymus sighed in relief. "Now let's see who dares desert. The Persians will surely take their rage out on any cowards." Clearchus listened to Tormid's report. Though he disliked the young man, he admitted this victory saved the army. He knew the undisciplined mercenaries thrived on adversity. Constant, low-level harassment like Mithridates' tactics was the true threat to their morale. Smiling, he told Tormid, "Thank Davos for his efforts. Warn him that the enemy will likely strike again soon." "What? Mithridates is dead?" Areus couldn't believe his ears. "Yes, General. His body is outside the tent," the guard confirmed. Areus rushed out, followed by Artaeozus and Tissapherne's confidant. Mithridates' corpse was gruesome, riddled with wounds and a fist-sized hole in his neck, still leaking blood. As Areus inspected the body, Artaeozus roared at the returning Persian cavalry. "Who did this? It was Menon's men, the cavalryman stammered, describing the ambush. Idiots. Defeated by Menon's trash? 30 lashes for every man. Then you're demoted to the baggage train. Artaozus bellowed. The cavalryman kowtowed, begging for mercy. Areus, though valuing these Greek-speaking riders, didn't intervene. He ordered them dragged away and demanded, "Bring me the captured Greeks. I need to interrogate them. Kill them, then march on the barbarians." Artaozus shouted impatiently. "We must identify the new leaders of the mercenaries before acting," Areus countered calmly. "Ask them yourself. I'm going to avenge Mithridates." Artaozus stormed off. Areus shrugged at Tissapherne's man. He was nominally the commander, but Artaozus and Mithridates had constantly undermined him. With Mithridates dead, the impulsive Artaozus would be easier to manage. Artaozus, though rash, was no fool in battle. He took 200 horse archers and 200 archers to pursue the Greeks. With his highly mobile force, Artaozus spotted the massive Greek column by afternoon. "Deploy in echelon formation. Close in," Artaozus commanded, eyes cold with bloodlust. Cleaner's rear guard expected the Persians but assumed it was another parley, so they remained largely unconcerned. As the Persians closed to within 100 meters, Cleaner realized the danger. "Prepare to defend." A rain of arrows slammed into the Greek shields. The dense formation suffered casualties, mostly among the lighter troops. "Break formation. Hoplites charge," Cleaner ordered. More arrows fell. The baggage train panicked, dragging livestock north to avoid the crossfire. 3 hoplite companies charged with shields raised. The Persians immediately retreated. Hoplites couldn't catch light archers. Once the hoplites halted to rest, the Persian arrow rain resumed. While shields protected the hoplites, their limbs remained exposed, and their linen breastplates couldn't stop every arrow, leading to constant minor wounds. Unable to close the distance, the hoplites were sitting ducks. Cleaner dared not send peltasts, as their javelins lacked the range of the Persian bows. Timasian sent 200 Cretan archers to reinforce them. Cleaner's hopes were dashed. The Cretan archers lacked the range of the Persian professionals and suffered a dozen casualties trying to close the gap. The army halted. Tormid rode to me. "Clearchus wants you to send a force to flank the enemy and attack from the rear." I understood the plan and looked to Felicius, who nodded in agreement. "Assists, fetch Capua," I ordered. Felicius was impressed. I had chosen the perfect man instantly, proving my rapid growth as a leader. As Capua's hoplites moved out, Hieronymus sent his own company to coordinate a pincer movement. But the experienced Artaozus had his horse archers scouting the flanks. They spotted the maneuver and retreated, nullifying the trap. Capua prudently withdrew, but Xenophon, leading Hieronymus's detachment, pursued recklessly. He failed to catch any Persians and lost a dozen men to arrows before Artaozus ran out of ammunition. Xenophon was reprimanded upon his return. The Greeks reached a village by sunset. I, too tired to stop the looting, instructed Mersis to recruit Persian slaves by promising them freedom in exchange for help, then headed to the command tent. Inside, Cleaner complained, "These Persians are like flies. We have no cavalry to catch them." Felicius and I entered. The other leaders greeted us with newfound respect, though their faces remained grim due to the day's losses. "What if they attack the same way tomorrow?" Cleaner asked, worried. "Worse," Xenophon added heavily. "If we don't find a counter, they'll realize this is our weakness and bring thousands of archers. It will be our destruction." The Greek leaders were somber. Their easy victory against the king of Persia and Tissaphernes' restraint had fostered overconfidence, but a small force of Persian archers and horse archers had just exposed the fatal vulnerability of their heavy infantry. "We need weapons with equal or greater range than the Persians," Clearchus stated firmly. "Rhodian slingers," Xenophon suddenly shouted. I recalled Antonius mentioning that Rhodian slingers were highly sought after in the Mediterranean for their precision and 400 to 500 meter range. I knew of Rhodes from my past life as the site of the Colossus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, though it was built long after Alexander. I mused that if Greece were united, combining elite units like Cretan archers, Thessalian cavalry, and Rhodian slingers would be unstoppable. Unfortunately, the fiercely independent city-states remained divided, and Sparta's rigid, Isolationist politics made unification impossible. Temasian lamented. If only we had Rhodian slingers. We do, Xenophon countered. Many Rhodians joined us in Aeolia, but Cyrus's generosity provided them with shields and spears, causing them to abandon their slings. It is time they pick them up again. Agreed, Cleaner added. We must organize them into a slinger unit to counter the Persian archers. The others concurred. Clearchus ordered, proceed immediately. Slaughter some of our sheep and use their intestines to craft slings. We also need cavalry to pursue the Persians, Xanthoparus suggested. Let's gather the pack horses and form a mounted unit. The leaders quickly reached a consensus. The army mobilized. Over 300 Rhodians were organized into a slinger unit, and 50 pack horses were gathered, mostly from my camp, which housed many Thessalians. When Xenophon proposed the Athenian Leuciusi as commander, I objected, recommending Lades from my own camp instead. Given the cavalry's composition, the leaders agreed to my choice. The next day, the mercenaries rested to conduct intensive training for the new units. The Persians were also active. Artaeozus returned to camp, boasting of his success to Areus and demanding command of all horse archers and archers to crush the Greeks. Areus, cautious and possessive, refused. With only 7,000 men left after Cyrus's defeat, losing control of his archers would leave him with only 3,000 men, undermining his authority as commander. Enraged by the refusal, Artaeozus accused Areus of jealousy. He stormed off to Tissaphernes' camp. You claim you can crush the Greeks with enough archers? Tissaphernes asked skeptically. Yes, Governor, Artaeozus replied. The Greeks are clumsy heavy infantry. They are helpless at range. I inflicted 500 casualties with only 400 men without losing a single soldier. If I had more, I could wipe them out. He added, Areus refused my proposal, so I came to you. Tissaphernes expressed shock and sorrow over Mithridates' death. His death might embolden the Greeks, Tissaphernes noted. I hear the Spartan Clearchus is their new leader? That is what the deserters say, Artaeozus confirmed. We cannot let him gain prestige, Tissaphernes declared coldly. We must harass them until they break. Artaeozus, take 2,000 archers and 500 horse archers. As for Areus, Tissaphernes turned to Zysite. Go to Areus. If he won't fight, he will hand over his troops to someone who will, or I will hold him accountable for his actions during Cyrus's rebellion. Zysite smiled. He will understand, Governor. Tissaphernes' eyes flashed with menace. Artaeozus thanked him profusely. Victory will earn you the rank of my adjutant, Tissaphernes promised. As Artaeozus left, Orontes expressed doubt. If he succeeded once, he can do it again, Tissaphernes insisted. I am willing to gamble to end this. A Spartan Ephor leading them? Cyrus must have had Spartan backing, Orontes growled. The Greeks have hated us for decades, Tissaphernes lamented. I warned Darius against supporting Sparta, but he was misled by Cyrus. We should have let Sparta and Athens destroy each other. You are right, Orontes agreed. I will advise the king to reconsider our relationship with Sparta. That is why we must finish the Greeks now, Tissaphernes said. Artaeozus will bring us victory. At dusk, the leaders gathered once more in the war tent. Cleaner reported that his new slingers company, formed to replace losses from the rearguard, was now fully trained and ready for combat. I reported that my cavalry, mostly recruited from my own camp and stationed on the flank, was also battle-ready. I noted the era's cavalry tactics, ramming, thrusting, javelins, and archery, but observed that the lack of stirrups made high-speed combat risky for the riders. Since the new cavalry was equipped only with spears, their primary tactical advantage lay in pursuing fleeing enemies. Clearchus announced that he had scouted the upcoming route with a guide. Temasian warned that scouting was dangerous due to roaming Persian patrols. Clearchus dismissed the danger, citing divine protection, and revealed a critical discovery. Cleaner pressed him for details. Clearchus described a narrow gorge for miles ahead, barely wide enough for 20 men abreast, which was the only viable passage. Xanthoparus expressed concern about a potential Persian ambush at the gorge. Xenophon suggested passing through the gorge before dawn to catch the Persians off guard. Clearchus agreed, noting that Persians avoided night movement due to the risk of cavalry accidents. The group reached a consensus and looked to Clearchus for the final decision. Clearchus proposed a plan to use the gorge as a trap to strike back at their pursuers. Empty, Xantiparis speculated that they would deploy for battle immediately after clearing the gorge. Timasian added that the narrow terrain would hinder the Persian retreat, allowing the Greeks to inflict heavy casualties. Xenophon questioned whether the Persians would take the bait if they sensed a trap. Clearchus insisted they would lure the Persians into a pursuit and attack only when the enemy was within reach. The group refined the plan. Use slingers and cavalry to surprise the Persians, then drive them toward the gorge to bottleneck their retreat. The leaders quickly finalized the strategy. I suddenly suggested ambushing the Persians from behind by sealing the gorge after they entered. The leaders were stunned by the suggestion from the quiet, observant Davos. Clearchus asked if I intended to annihilate the entire force. I confirmed that only total destruction would deter future Persian attacks. Greek warfare favored frontal assaults, largely ignoring complex maneuvers like ambushes or encirclements, tactics that would not be perfected until Hannibal's era. Drawing on modern military wisdom, I believed in focusing force to break the enemy decisively. Clearchus, impressed but cautious, questioned the logistics of the ambush and the risk of the Persians not pursuing them at all. I asked for the distance between the forest and the gorge. Clearchus replied, 3 miles, demonstrating his command of the terrain. I argued that we could hide 300 to 400 men in the forest before Persian scouts awoke, and even if the enemy force was large, we could leave a gap to intercept the fleeing Persians. I felt a surge of pride at the strategic depth of my plan, adding that if the Persians failed to appear, the ambush force could easily retreat. The leaders were convinced and approved the addition of the ambush unit. Clearchus, showing rare appreciation for the young man, asked if I would lead the ambush. I accepted the responsibility despite Felicius's hesitation, nodding firmly. The next day, the Greeks broke camp before dawn. They reached the gorge just as the first light appeared. I split off with 3 hoplite companies and 1 peltask company. The leaders offered blessings and encouragement, while Felicius and Antonius exchanged final words of support with me. I embraced Felicius and led my troops toward the forest, watched by the increasingly respectful soldiers. Meanwhile, Artaeozus, emboldened by his 6,000-strong force, sought to crush the Greeks to secure a promotion. Scouts reported that the Greeks had already passed through the gorge and were 20 miles ahead. Believing the Greeks were fleeing in fear, Artaeozus grew anxious to catch and destroy them that very day. I urged my troops to accelerate, passing through the canyon without stopping, as scouts reported the Greeks were only 5 or 6 miles from the exit. The Persians have entered the canyon, leader Davos. Assist sprinted back to the woods to report. How many? Antonius asked. A long column, thousands of them. Assist gasped. We've hooked a big fish, Amintas whistled. Execute the second plan. I ordered, maintaining my composure despite the tension. Get to work, brothers. Capua shouted. Report, the Persians have exited the canyon. 6 or 7,000 archers and horse archers. They think they can crush us with arrows. The more they bring, the more we kill. Can Davos hold them? Our attack must be swift and fierce. Clearchus declared. Return to your positions, deploy, and advance. The leaders roared and moved into action. Artaeozus exited the canyon and deployed his formation. Archers in the center, cavalry on the flanks. 2 miles out, scouts reported. The Greeks are advancing toward us. Experienced in skirmishing, Artaeozus feared being trapped at the canyon mouth. He ordered his entire force to shift left. Though mobile, the 7,000-strong force struggled to reform under pressure. The Greeks gave them no time. Seeing the Greeks approaching, Artaeozus realized that changing formation now would be suicidal. He ordered his original formation restored, planning to fire 2 volleys before retreating to find a better opening. His face paled as he saw the Greek line, which was far longer than his own and still extending. Artaeozus knew the traditional Greek phalanx was usually deep and dense for impact. This line was only 2 or 3 ranks deep. He realized they didn't need mass to crush his light troops. They were surrounding him. Panicked, Artaeozus hesitated to retreat, fearing the loss of morale and time. He decided to risk 1 volley, hoping to disrupt the Greeks before pulling back. He briefed his officers and waited for the Greeks to close to 100 meters. He sneered, waiting for the Greeks to die, but they halted at 200 meters. Frustrated by the difficulty of commanding such a large force, he chose to wait for their move. Suddenly, he saw countless arms rising behind the Greek hoplites. Slingers, he gasped, shocked by their unexpected presence. A hail of stones slammed into the Persian center. Archers were struck down, and the formation fell into chaos. As the slingers fired again, Artaeozus screamed, "Retreat! Retreat!" Before his horn could sound, the Greeks roared Ares and charged like a tidal wave. A group of cavalry burst from their center to spearhead the assault. The Persian army collapsed. Panic took hold. They abandoned all order and stampeded toward the canyon, desperate to escape. Artaeozus, a veteran of Cunaxa, finally understood the terror of the Greek hoplites. He fled toward the canyon mouth, surrounded by his guards. The canyon narrowed at the entrance, and fierce winds buffeted Artaeozus as he entered. He spurred his horse, knowing speed was their only hope. They navigated the S-shaped path at high velocity. Rounding a bend, they slammed into a waist-high wall of stone and wood. Artaeozus was thrown as the stampeding Persians behind them piled up. It became a hellish slaughterhouse. The trapped soldiers were trampled into a bloody mass by their own comrades. Shield wall. Javelins ready. I issued my orders with calm precision. Persians climbing the wall were met by Epitenes' javelins, then blocked by the dense Greek shield wall. The hoplite spears easily dispatched the disorganized, panicked enemy. I had built the wall to slow the Persian cavalry, but it proved even more effective as a bottleneck, trapping the Persian rout and preventing them from ever mounting a counterattack. The Persian remnants, trapped between the pursuing mercenaries and the impassable terrain, suffered a total mental collapse and surrendered. When the commanders arrived to meet me, the carnage in the canyon left them horrified. Looking at me with newfound awe, Xenophon remarked, "Davos, you are truly worthy of being called the god-favored of Hades." I, struggling to reconcile the brutality with my conscience, asked Clearchus how they should handle the prisoners. Clearchus replied coldly, "Once we strip them of their weapons and armor, we will sever their tendons, wound their thighs, and send them back to be a burden for Tissaphernes." I remained silent, understanding the logic. The mercenaries lacked the food and manpower to guard prisoners, and forcing Tissaphernes to care for the wounded would deplete his active fighting force. Clearchus surveyed the scene and praised me, noting that the sight of this slaughter would surely terrify the Persians. As I led my troops out of the canyon, the soldiers cheered for the young leader whose tactical brilliance had secured a perfect victory with minimal forces. I had earned the army's respect. Tissaphernes' main force did not arrive until the afternoon. Upon seeing the carnage, a furious Tissaphernes threw his helmet to the ground. He ordered a small detachment to handle the aftermath while forcing the rest of his army to bypass the canyon. Areus remained silent, knowing Artaeozus was likely among the dead. Having lost 2 rivals in 3 days, he felt a chilling sense of vulnerability. The Persians suffered over 6,000 casualties, while the Greeks remained virtually unscathed. True to Clearchus' prediction, the Persians were too intimidated to attack for several days, allowing the mercenaries to march and forage easily until they reached the city of Larissa on the Tigris. Larissa was a massive, desolate city with 30-meter-high walls. Its sparse population and abandoned fields made it unappealing for the mercenaries to conquer. Maligi explained that the city, formerly known as Kala, was an ancient Assyrian stronghold. Cyrus the Great only captured it after the sun god Mitra allegedly shrouded the city in darkness, causing the panicked residents to flee. I had kept Maligi as a guide to learn the terrain. With Xenophon busy as Hieronymus adjutant, Maligi's historical anecdotes provided me with both utility and entertainment. Matones, a guard, suddenly challenged Maligi. "You have your sun god. We have Apollo. Who is stronger?" Maligi scoffed. "Mitra is the master of nature, the provider of fertility and peace. He is far superior to your minor deity." Enraged by the insult to Apollo, Matones moved to strike Maligi, but was restrained by Silius. I intervened, sternly warning Maligi that insulting Greek gods would not be tolerated. I was determined to curb the Persian's arrogance. Realizing he was on the verge of being torn apart, Maligi quickly apologized and even slapped himself to show sincerity. Once the tension eased, I asked why the city appeared so desolate. Maliji hesitated, then muttered, "Because the residents are primarily Medes." I realized the truth. The Persian court suppressed the region to prevent the Medes and Assyrians from rising again. I pressed on, correctly guessing that the Persians used heavy taxation and forced conscription to keep the local population weak. Maliji was stunned, admitting that I was unlike the brainless soldiers and possessed the intellect of a high-ranking Persian official. I smiled, stating I had no love for Persia. When asked if it was because I was Greek, I remained silent. Internally, I felt no true connection to Greece. I was a 21st-century Chinese man at heart. I played the role of a Greek leader purely for survival and camaraderie. I preferred the democratic ideals of the Greek city-states, which felt closer to my modern roots. The next day, they reached Mesphala. Maliji explained that Mesphala was the former Assyrian capital, Nineveh. He recounted how Cyrus the Great finally conquered it after the war god Bahram shook the city with thunder. Matonis mocked the story, but Maliji, having learned his lesson, ignored him. I gazed at the massive ruins. Even in decay, the scale of the ancient Assyrian capital was awe-inspiring, a testament to a fallen empire. Overcome by the transience of history, I lamented, even the mightiest nations eventually fall. Empty, Artaeozus asked if Persia would fall, while Maliji defensively asked about Greece. I replied cryptically, "If you live long enough, you might see it in 50 years." Artaeozus wondered if it was a prophecy, while Maliji remained skeptical. I kept silent, thinking of Alexander of Macedonia, who would eventually conquer both Greece and Persia. The mercenaries continued their march for 2 more days. On the 3rd day, Tissaphernes' army reappeared. I deployed my 50-man light cavalry unit primarily for reconnaissance. Lacking the individual combat prowess of Persian horsemen, they operated in 5-man squads within a 2-mile radius, retreating to report immediately upon spotting the enemy. Persians approaching, prepare to defend. Messengers raced around the massive Greek square formation, relaying Clearchus's orders. Protecting the baggage train in the center, the Greeks could not break formation. They tightened the square, soldiers gripped their shields and spears, and slowed their march to maintain cohesion. Tissaphernes' banners soon appeared at the rear. Having easily routed him at Cunaxa, the Greeks remained unfazed. A second force of over 10,000 appeared on Tissaphernes' left. The banners identified them as the forces of Orontes, the governor of Armenia, as the leaders had anticipated. A third army, equally large, emerged on Tissaphernes' right, bearing familiar insignia. "I remember. That's the army we encountered on the road, said to be led by the king of Persia's brother." Assist shouted, "They've been tailing us. Tissaphernes has harbored malice all along," Felicius noted grimly. I nodded stiffly, my hands white-knuckled on the reins. With Arius's remnants joining the 3 armies, the Persian force formed a massive, crescent-shaped line. Facing the entire Persian military without Cyrus's support, the Greeks felt a rare, palpable tension. Knowing only a desperate fight offered survival, Cleaner watched the enemy's advance. As they neared range, he commanded, "Slingers, prepare." Slingers in the rear unleashed a volley. Though accuracy suffered at 300 meters, the density of the Persian ranks ensured every stone found a target, stalling the enemy's momentum. "Governor, the enemy's fire is too intense. Shall we retreat and let the wings advance first?" an officer suggested. Tissaphernes refused. As the king's appointed leader, he feared that failing to press the attack would lead the king's brother and son-in-law to report his incompetence to Artaxerxes, ruining his standing. Tissaphernes ordered his 50,000 troops to press forward. He refused to engage in close combat, still haunted by the Greek hoplites' devastating charge at Cunaxa. Persian officers cut down their own retreating soldiers to force the advance. The Persian lines stretched, nearly encircling the Greek square. I dismounted, sending my horse to the baggage train. "Form shield wall," I commanded, my nerves steadying. Assists and his messengers relayed the order across the left flank. 4 rows of hoplites locked their bronze-rimmed, 1-meter diameter shields, creating an impenetrable wall. The design, worn on the forearm, allowed for superior endurance and protection against arrows. 500 Cretan archers, bolstered by soldiers who had scavenged Persian bows, took positions behind the wall, ready to return fire. As the Persians closed to within 100 meters, both sides unleashed a storm of projectiles. The air filled with arrows, creating a dark cloud that blocked the sun. The sound of wood and bronze clashing echoed as the volleys struck home, followed by the screams of the wounded. The Persians halted at 50 meters, fearing the Greek peltasts' countercharge. The archery duel persisted. The ground around the Greek square became a forest of arrows. Archers simply plucked spent shafts from the dirt to fire back. I grew accustomed to the rhythmic thud of arrows against shields, though the occasional groan of a wounded comrade weighed on me. I held my position, knowing this was a battle of attrition. Empty, Tissaphernes faced a dilemma. His light infantry lacked sufficient shielding, and the dense formation meant every Greek projectile found a mark. Wounded horses panicked, trampling his own ranks, forcing the cavalry to withdraw. Seeing his lines thinning and hearing the cries of his men, Tissaphernes hesitated. A messenger arrived. "Lord, Xerxes says his casualties are too high. Shall we attack or retreat?" Tissaphernes exhaled and answered without hesitation, "Retreat." The Greeks watched in disbelief as the Persians withdrew. The battle cost the Persians 4,000 casualties. The mercenaries suffered 900, mostly minor wounds. Exhausted, the Greeks camped north by midday. I held an emergency meeting. My unit had 19 dead and 185 wounded, overwhelming the medical corps. Amyntas scoffed, "We're soldiers. We expect to die. Just patch them up and move on." I looked at my officers. We are far from home. If we don't care for our own, who will care for us? From now on, in my camp, we leave no enemy behind and abandon no comrade. We live and die together. Well said. Felicius cheered, followed by applause from the others. The camp mobilized. I categorized the wounded and organized teams for sanitation, transport, and treatment. Hirpulisi handled the critical cases, while others were cleaned and bandaged. Under my command, the medical operation was efficient and orderly. My speech spread through the ranks. Combined with my previous victories, the soldiers began calling me the Merciful and our Davos. Other units began sending their wounded to my camp. My own men grew frustrated as their resources were stretched thin. Cleaner and Timasian arrived to inspect the medical camp. Impressed by the efficiency, they dropped their skepticism toward my God-favored reputation. I agreed to treat their 500 wounded, provided they supplied materials and labor. I hoped to use this to expand my influence and medical knowledge. The other leaders followed suit, seeking my aid. Clearchus's aide praised me, but Clearchus remained deep in thought. Clearchus admitted, "I was biased. Davos is a talent. Sparta needs this medical corps for the coming war." "What war?" the aide asked. "War with Persia," Clearchus replied. "Cyrus is dead, Tissaphernes is our enemy, and the new king is hostile. Everything points to conflict." The aide fell silent, feeling the weight of the impending struggle. "Do you think Davos will join us?" Clearchus asked. "Of course. We are Sparta," the aide replied. "I hope so," Clearchus nodded. Since Hirpulisi was focused on surgery, I assigned my trusted guard, Zysite, to manage the medical camp, though I felt the role was beneath Zysite's potential. I returned to my tent at dusk. I reviewed the day's tactics, comparing my experiences with my past life military knowledge, a daily ritual to hone my command skills. I realized the limitations of infantry in varied terrain and the vulnerability of heavy infantry to massed archery. I pondered why Tissaphernes hadn't used javelins, which could pierce bronze shields. I concluded the Persians lacked the specialized javelin throwers that the Greeks possessed. I envisioned Roman-style javelins that would weigh down enemy shields. I analyzed the battle from Tissaphernes' perspective, noting that without superior cavalry, the Greeks would have been doomed. I recorded these insights on papyrus. "Davos, you have a visitor," someone announced. I looked up to see Olivarus, who looked strangely uneasy. "You're recovered?" I asked. Olivarus explained he had left the medical camp early. I asked about Zysite, then realized I'd left him at the clinic. Olivarus ushered the visitor in. A woman in an elegant chiton and himation entered, her grace undeniable. "Calixituoia," I exclaimed. She unveiled her face and bowed gracefully. "Leader Davos." Olivarus winked and slipped out. I recalled Oliverus's earlier comparison of her to Aphrodite. Calixitoia teased, "Are you not happy to see me? Your arrival leaves me speechless, and your beauty makes it impossible to think." I replied with a flirtatious charm that belied my 19-year-old body. Calixitoia smiled. "You have a way with words. Everyone is talking about your victories over Mithridates and Ardeosus. I've come to congratulate you. Am I too late?" "Your words are worth 1,000. I laughed. "You didn't come just to offer congratulations, did you?" "I have a request," Calixitoia said, looking at me. "You once told me I could come to you with any request." "Of course. Speak." "I want to join your medical corps," she replied earnestly. I was stunned. "What? Is someone treating you poorly there?" "Mercis is kind," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "But everyone is busy with the march and the war, and I am idle. I've visited the medical corps, and I can do the work the slave women do, and do it better." "Are you sure?" "You will face gruesome wounds, blood, filthy bodies, and delirious patients. You might even face harassment." I tried to dissuade her, but she remained firm. "I'm not afraid. You don't know the wounded. They aren't bullies. They are grateful to these women." She closed her eyes, recalling the scene. I watched her, feeling as if I were facing a modern woman striving to prove her worth through meaningful action. "Very well, I agree." "Really?" Calixitoia's eyes widened. In Greek city-states, women were traditionally restricted and lacked agency. Feeling insecure and fearing abandonment, she sought the respect afforded to the medical corps. She had hoped to gain my approval, but hadn't expected such a quick success. I, unfamiliar with Greek traditions and accustomed to modern gender equality, had only hesitated out of concern that her beauty would invite trouble. "Really?" I confirmed. She rushed toward me in excitement. I instinctively pulled her into my arms, and the spark ignited. "Oliverus, stop eavesdropping on the tent. That's a violation of military law," Georgos shouted, arriving for his shift. "Shoo!" Oliverus gestured for silence, whispering, "Listen, the battle inside is intense." "Battle?" Georgos was confused. Oliverus pulled him closer, and they heard the sounds of passion from within. "Davos's spring has arrived," Oliverus whispered enviously. "He's truly blessed by the gods to be with the most beautiful woman in our ranks." The next day, I rode in high spirits, relishing memories of the night. Calixitoia's beauty and grace had captivated me. I had spent the night with her, and in my relief, I forgave Oliverus for his eavesdropping. As we lay together, I felt a newfound connection to this world. Yet, I knew passion was fleeting. I was a mercenary and a commoner, while she was a noble woman accustomed to luxury. I buried my anxieties, focusing on the immediate goal, surviving to return to Greece. The appearance of the Persians ruined my mood. Tissaphernes had shifted tactics to harassment. Persian horse archers would charge, fire, and retreat, keeping the mercenaries on edge and slowing their march. The leaders countered by integrating slingers, archers, and heavy infantry to deter the horse archers. As they neared the Dukia Mountains, the terrain grew rugged. The Greek formation broke apart in narrow passes, allowing Persian cavalry to exploit the gaps with arrow fire. The leaders formed small, 200-man companies from the smaller mercenary groups to guard the flanks and rear, ready to form defensive lines whenever the main formation was compressed. This continued for days until they reached the mountains, where the cavalry could no longer follow. Exhausted, the army halted at the base of the second mountain range to rest. Soldiers removed their armor to wipe away sweat, while the baggage train staff checked their animals. The army huddled in the narrow pass. Suddenly, a barrage of arrows and stones rained down, throwing the column into chaos. Clearchus and his 800 Spartan warriors reacted first. Seeing the attack coming from the heights, Clearchus ordered, "Spartans, forward!" They charged toward the summit, shields raised, as Persian light infantry pelted them with arrows. The veterans quickly formed shield walls. However, the baggage train personnel, mostly slaves and women, panicked, suffering heavy casualties in the arrow rain. I was frantic, worried for Calixitoia's safety. "Assists, tell the officers to form a shield wall and move toward the baggage train and medical corps." I shouted. "Yes, leader." Felicius, Capus, and Antonius were already organizing their men into shield formations. Oliverus and Matones rushed to shield me. "Maligi, are you all right?" I yelled. I'm fine, Maliji shouted back. Protect him, I commanded. Matonis, despite his disdain for the Persian, followed the order precisely. Acting as guard captain, Matonis ordered Geogris and others to secure Maliji. Maliji looked at my back, his eyes filled with gratitude. I, ignoring my own safety, peered from behind a shield toward the baggage train. I moved toward the center, relieved to see the medical corps had also formed a shield wall. Here, Pulisai. Here, Pulisai. I called out. I'm here. Here, Pulisai replied from behind the shields. We are all safe. I finally relaxed after Here Pulisai explained that the medical corps' safety was largely due to Calixichoya. When the first arrow rain fell, she immediately ordered them under the supply wagons, while Here Pulisai organized over 100 wounded soldiers into a shield formation to protect the rest. Here Pulisai praised Calixichoya's calm reaction, giving me a new perspective on her. Perhaps this composure was exactly why she was the only one of Cyrus the Younger's concubines to escape the Persian raids. The baggage train suffered heavily, while Mersis remained unharmed. Many slaves and women were struck, and several pack animals died. Accustomed to the brutality of war, I ignored Mercis's wailing and did not divert troops to protect the noncombatants. Fortunately, the Persian assault ceased as Clearchus's forces neared the hilltop. The Persians retreated rather than engage the mercenaries directly. Clearchus left Spartan warriors on the summit to maintain a defensive watch. Clearchus gathered the leaders, warning that the Persian light infantry would likely continue using hit-and-run archery tactics on subsequent ridges. He noted that their massive, cumbersome baggage train made evasion nearly impossible. Clearchus proposed a counter-strategy. A detachment would flank the next ridge while he led the vanguard in a frontal assault, cutting off the Persians' retreat if they attempted to hold the high ground. He jabbed his finger at the map, declaring they would surround and eliminate the attackers. Xanthoparis lamented that the Persians likely lacked the courage to stay and fight. Timasian cursed the cowardly rabbits, frustrated by the mounting casualties among his men. Xenophon volunteered to lead the flanking maneuver. Hieronymus's expression darkened, recalling Xenophon's previous reckless command that had cost many lives. I immediately voiced my support for Xenophon. Cleaner urged haste, noting the weather and the risk of being forced to camp in the mountains overnight. The plan was approved, and the leaders dispersed to prepare. I lingered, lost in thought. Clearchus paused and asked what was on my mind. Surprised by the usually taciturn leader's interest, I admitted I was relieved the Persians hadn't fortified the ridges, which would have caused far greater losses. Clearchus dismissed the threat, explaining that Persian nobles like Tissaphernes lacked the Greeks' endurance. They traveled with excessive luxuries, tents, concubines, and dancers, and were bound by rigid schedules that made them predictable and slow. I realized the Persians were even less efficient than my own bloated force. I then asked if the Persians could be more effective by splitting their light infantry to strike the rear, flanks, and front in sequence. Clearchus frowned, asking for clarification. I described a strategy of staggered, multi-directional ambushes that would force the Greeks to disperse their strength, slow their march, and exhaust their vigilance. Clearchus stared at me in surprise, questioning if I spent my time contemplating such tactics. I modestly replied that my lack of experience forced me to study and think constantly. Clearchus regained his stoic composure, noting that while the tactic was sound, it required high-level discipline and leadership that he doubted the current Persian force possessed. I shook my head in agreement. Clearchus looked at me intently, suggesting we discuss such ideas in the future before walking away. The Persian raid had cost the mercenaries over 1,000 casualties, more than half being non-combatants. My own unit suffered over 150 casualties and lost many pack animals, forcing me to reassign half my soldiers to assist the baggage train. While the main army slowed down, Xenophon's flanking maneuver successfully deterred the Persians from blocking the vanguard, allowing the army to clear the ridge line. By dusk, they reached Persian villages, which they looted for supplies. Finding a cache of provisions intended for Tissaphernes' army boosted morale. The medical corps worked late into the night. Later, Calixichoya rested against me, and I recounted how Here Pulisai praised her management of the wounded, earning her the nickname Persephone of the mortal realm. Calixichoya smirked, teasing that she had become my mistress. Overcome by desire, I pulled her close, whispering that I enjoyed having a mistress. Calixitoya laughed, feigning shock at my blasphemy. I pressed against her, and she clung to my arms. I asked why the wounded obeyed her so readily, though I already suspected the answer. She explained she had used my reputation as a shield, telling them she was his woman, and had Herculecide delay treatment for a soldier who had harassed her, serving as a warning to others. She asked if I found her ruthless. I praised her, telling her that since Herculecide was focused on medicine and Herculecide couldn't stay in the camp forever, I wanted her to manage the medical corps. Calixitoya looked at me with surprise and delight. I explained that her experience managing her father's estate in Miletus and her recent performance proved her capability. I intended to keep Herculecide as the nominal head for appearances, but she would hold the real authority. Calixitoya embraced me, overjoyed. I tasked her with convincing the visiting doctors and wounded soldiers to stay permanently. Calixitoya saluted playfully, though I was too exhausted for further intimacy. As she dressed, she asked why I wanted to retain the wounded soldiers specifically. I couldn't admit my deep insecurity in this strange world. Commanding more soldiers was my only way to find peace. I told Calixitoya, the road home is long and treacherous. It's safer and more effective to command these men myself than to let others lead them. Calixitoya saw my ambition and confidence. For a moment, my face mirrored Cyrus the Younger's, chilling her. She stepped forward and embraced me tightly. Sensing her distress, I asked, "What's wrong?" She whispered, "When we return to Greece, what do you intend to do?" "I haven't fully decided," I replied, though I had been contemplating it. "But one thing is certain. Wherever I go, you go with me."